Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Tuesday, and this is the Jeff Gerstmann Show. Hi, my name is Jeff Gerstmann. I am here to host this week's installment of the show. It's 4/18. I don't know what drugs you're supposed to do on the 18th. I don't know how. Hang on, I have a chart here. Let me look at my chart. It says here, okay, let me look. Okay, it's the 18th. So if we put a yellow handkerchief in our back left okay, hang on. No, wait. That's the wrong form. No, okay. So a black and white handkerchief in the back right pocket. Okay. We put a toothbrush in our shirt pocket. And then bath salt. Okay, bath salts. Bath salts. I'm reading this wrong. Methcathinone? No one's doing cat anymore. Hi. Welcome to the program. It's time for video games. Is it only the 16th? Okay, so then I'm reading this whole thing wrong. It's April 16th. Did you do your taxes if you're in America? It's the thing they don't tell you. Okay, they will let anyone go to the internet and type in things and start a business. They'll let you do it. They won't tell you anything about the things you need to do in order to make sure that that whole thing is legal and on the up and up and all of that sort of stuff when it comes to taxes. My taxes are very confusing now because of, being, I was going to say self-employed. I guess that's true, but it's, there is a company, there's a company entity, there's, money goes to the company instead of me, and there's this and that, and I have to pay myself, and I haven't been doing that. And so there was a lot of phone calls. I had to hire an accountant a couple of years ago when all of this stuff changed. And so I finally got a call over the weekend because they're working to get everything done, in time for Monday, because Monday's was the 15th. And she's just asking me these questions, and I'm just like, that sounds right. It's like, do you have your tax return from last year? I mean, yes, in theory it's here somewhere. Do I have it in front of me that I could look at? And absolutely not. She just kind of laughed and said, all right, I will send you an email with all right, you need to do this. And I'm like, okay, that is a lot of money. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. Taxes are weird. Being in a company, being a corporation is also very weird. But there's a lot of benefits to it, I'm told. So I don't know. Hopefully I listened to the right people when setting all of that stuff up. It's, there's a whole thing to it. But yeah, I don't know. This will be the year that it all gets set straight, because after talking to her about it, because it's been a couple of years of working with these accountants, and last year I just sent the stuff over and they went, okay, here's what you do. But this is the first full year that I've had no attachment to my previous job or any of the other money I got from them on the way out and whatever else. And so it's a different tax situation. And so she's like, I'm going to make a note here. So, we got a lot of taxes, the 15th, we're real busy right now, but I'm going to make a note here. Once this is all done, we're going to get you on the phone and get all this stuff squared away. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Oh God, thank you. I've been hoping someone would return a phone call, because I feel like I've been hinting or telling them I have no idea what I'm doing. So she's like, we'll figure all this out and get it all set up, and then you can pay yourself a salary out of this company that you've been running. I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah. That it turns out you need to do that. And anyway. So that was my weekend, and a lot of last week was making sure that all of that stuff was where it needed to be, and all of that. And hopefully that's all done. I think we're on an extension for, anyway, whatever. Taxes. I hope you came out ahead on your taxes. The whole like refund thing, people are like, refunds, people are like, my refunds are fantastic. And then you have people who are like, no, a refund means you paid them too much and they're just giving you back your money. And like, yeah, okay, fine. That's absolutely true. But like, just like, hey, it's fine. You just get just get the money back and feel good about it. Let people fucking feel good about getting a tax refund. Don't rob them of this, even if it is a fake joy, a lie we all tell ourselves. Oh yeah, you could make the argument of just like, hey, what if the government just told you exactly what you owed, and then you and then you paid that, and we're done? Yes, absolutely. Could the system be better? Absolutely. Is it like corruption on top of people greasing each other's palms, and yes, of course. They're going after, they're starting to ask a lot of questions about TurboTax and everything. We're like, hey, you guys seem like you are maybe directing people to spend money they don't need to spend. And then they're like, what? No, what? Look over here. And like, and trying to duck that, but we'll see how that goes. The tax system seems like it should be significantly less of a fucking racket and a scam than it is. With all these tax preparation services and so on and so forth. The government knows, unless you're like getting paid cash under the table and all this other stuff, like if you're trying to be a legit business and legit entity, the government knows exactly how much money you made and how much you owe, because everyone reports that shit. Everyone should just report that shit, and then the government says, okay, send us this much money. And then you go, okay. Or like, hey, like based on your estimated stuff last year, you're going to want to pay this much money over the course of the year, quarterly payments or whatever, to then end up not having to come up with a bunch of money in April. I'm like, okay, yeah, cool, great. Let's do that. Let's just do that. There's got to be a better way. But I don't know. I used TurboTax for a lot of years when my taxes were not nearly as complicated as they are now. Because mine are crazy, because working from home, you end up in a lot of situations where it's like, okay, well then some percentage of your internet bill is deductible. There's all sorts of weird stuff. I don't know. I don't know. But I'll learn as I go. As far as video games are concerned, they're out there. They're making a big splash. Have you heard of these things? It's like an interactive. You can jump and get these crystals, and then you get this key, and you run through this door. It's awesome. You got to check these things out. I have been checking out a couple of things. Some stuff that I'm playing that is not ready to discuss just yet, but that'll be, was that another week or two? I forget. Anyway, Life Eater came out today. I'm looking forward to playing some of that. I have not had any time to spend with Life Eater. But I messed around with a game called Clicker Arena for a while. People are mad about Clicker Arena on Steam. The Steam reviews have fallen to mixed because people who thought it was a clicker game or an idle game are being brutally rebuffed because it's too active for them. Because it is not a true incremental game. And so they're like, I refunded this because it said clicker in the name. And this isn't even, like, it's a run, like you get to a point where you lose and have to start over. Like, what is that? It's a really weird. So in some ways, for those people, there's too much game, and then on the other end of it, there's kind of not enough. It is a run-based game with, like, let's call it like a little bit of minor deck building in it, but not so much that you'd notice. And the numbers go up, but you can lose, you can die. Basically, you are a character or a collection of characters that is in a battle arena, and enemies are constantly swarming into the arena, and your heroes are running around and fighting them. You have no control over that. There's no clicking, in fact, to be done. You can't like go click on an orc to make him blow up. There is zero interaction that you have with that. And so I get it. Like the for a game that has clicker right in the name, like you are clicking on buttons on a menu. It is not a clicker. It is not an idle game. It is none of those things, but you have zero control over the combat other than clicking the level up buttons to spend gold on leveling up your character at a low level. That's basically, how it is working, but it's like a run based auto battling kind of game. And you are getting all these currencies as you fight enemies. You are getting all these currencies. And then occasionally you are drawing a card from a deck. And then there is a system there that is dictating what additional enemies are being added to the arena. And sometimes you'll get a card that'll remove the bottom 2 tiers of enemies that are currently spawning, which is a good thing because you only want high level enemies spawning because you get more gold out of that. And so eventually you want to kind of clear the bottom of the deck and make room for, more higher level enemies to come in. Some of them are dropping materials that you can then turn into more gold or turn into more experience points or whatever. So you're leveling up and you're finding gear and you're equipping them on your guys, all as they're running around the arena fighting each other. You can't even see their fucking life bars because the life bars aren't drawn anywhere on the UI. They're just above the guys' heads. But because there's such a swarm of shit happening all the time, you have no real indication as to how your guys are doing until one of them goes down and you see like their portrait turn into a timer, like a respawn timer. And if everyone dies, your run is over. And then you get a meta currency that you can spend outside the game to unlock new character classes and additional spells and additional whatevers. And so it is that kind of roguelite concept brought to this kind of auto battling video game. It's like $10. The problem I have with it is you can kind of get to the end of the game on your first run. The thing you need to watch out for is if you draw too many cards and cause too many high-level enemies to spawn into the arena before you've leveled up your characters, the characters will die. And so you have to kind of be mindful of that. But because they obfuscate the life bars, that is like a difficult kind of thing to eyeball. You're just like, I don't know. Like, is this going to be too much? I don't know. Let's make a weird robot goblin run in here with big swords. And see how that goes. See what happens, and if you start seeing your heroes dropping dead, you have items that you can use to revive them. And you're like, okay, is there a way for me to quickly level them up so that they stop dying? What can I do here to fix this? And sometimes there's nothing. Sometimes you can just bail on a run and they'll give you if you hit the bailout button before you're dead, they will give you like a bonus on your kind of, your metagame currency. And so it's weird because Clicker Arena has all of the trappings of a game I feel like I should get really absorbed to. And yesterday I was very absorbed in it. And then I got to a point where it's like once you like have drawn 70 tiers of cards or whatever it is, a little button shows up and says, you can click this button to fight the final boss. I'm like, oh, word? Okay. So I didn't click it for a while. I'm like, well, I should probably level up a bunch and I'm really kind of mowing through these enemies. I haven't gone down once yet, and so I'm well managed here. I could farm here for a while and get some more skill points, and go into the tech tree and blah blah blah. I could farm these enemies here and level up, but it got to a point where I'm like, this seems like it's I've been farming for a while. I've leveled up another 20 or 30 levels. I've filled up the skill trees for all of the individual characters. Let's go in there and fight this final boss. And you click the button and a big dragon appears. And I got the dragon like 2/3 of the way down and then died. I'm like, oh, okay. But it took like an hour of that run took like about an hour to get to that point. And so now I'm like, well, I wouldn't mind playing this again. Like it's mechanically fine. But I don't want to do another run of this and have an hour of basically meaningless upgrades to then eventually get another shot at this dragon. And, there are additional character classes as in some other things that I could unlock that would give me some additional ways to play it. But none of the character classes seem especially compelling. They're just a little trickier. It's like this one makes it so you can discard some cards and you can do this. And it's like different ways to kind of interact with your deck of enemy cards. And it's kind of just not enough. I don't know, especially for a game that is $10. I think it's $10, which is not a lot of money. But at the same time, as someone who played it for 3 hours and was like, I think I've seen all of this. I think I've seen quite a bit of this. And so I don't know. I'm a little wishy-washy on that particular aspect of it, right? Because the money thing, everyone's going to feel differently about the amount of money being asked for it or whatever. But like at the end of the day, it's like this interesting idea that while it does not make good on the incremental and clicker aspects of its title, and I do agree with the negative Steam reviews that Clicker Arena is named in a misleading fashion because it is not. At no point are you asked to click fast. At no point are you like, should I find where I have an auto clicker buried in a directory around here somewhere. Should I run that thing and so I can get to really clicking real fast without wearing out my mouse even more? So it doesn't have that aspect of the game. And one of the big appeals, and I think this is when not to like wax poetic about idle games here for you. But it was among my big problems with the AEW mobile game, which I think I got banned from, by the way. Was that it was this episodic thing that would reset. So you would get to the top of the tree and you would reset and the numbers would start back at 0. You're like, no, the whole fun of incremental games, idle games, all of this stuff is that you have amassed unforeseen numbers that are so big that they have come up with different numbering schemes in addition. They're like, look, man, we know that when the minute we write that this is E10 at the end of this, a lot of people's eyes glaze over. And so we've come up with, different ways of representing these high numbers that are not that scientific notation because some people are just not going to wrap their minds around the scientific notation. So you have AC and you're like, AC, was that quadrillion, trillions? I don't even know anymore. It's just a fake number, but I know that AD is higher than AC. Great. It's not even hex. And you see those numbers get higher and crazier, and when you prestige and restart with all this additional power, you are mowing through the low levels and laughing about it, going, oh man, that used to take an hour and now it takes like 4 seconds. What a wonderful experience. Like that is part of the draw of a lot of idle games, a lot of incremental games, is how fast can you blaze your way through those lower levels once you've become once you've ground out enough prestige currency to feel like a man, to feel like a real man. God damn it. We're going to smoke cigarettes and play idle games. And so it has none of that appeal. Clicker Arena, that is. Because it's run-based. And so you're always kind of starting over from scratch. And while you are spending some of your out-of-game currency on additional spells, and you can start with more food or whatever to kind of make the early game a little bit easier. It's just a different type of game. I'm not to say that I don't. It's not that aspect of the game is not enjoyable. It's that it's just not what people are looking for if they're coming in thinking it's going to be an idle game, thinking it's going to be one of these incremental games. And so it's an interesting thing about naming. We were talking about genres last week and how, genre names are often bad. And what does a genre mean anymore, especially these days? But, that can apply to a misleading name as well, because this game, I mean, I suppose clicker is a genre on its own, but they have applied the name clicker onto a game that is not a clicker. So weird days. Also, if you're on Cheech and Chong Watch like I am, you've been launching Call of Duty every morning, futilely, because Cheech and Chong have not been available for sale. Looks like they will. I'm guessing they will go up on like the 20th or the 19th or something like that, because no one wants to launch new skins on a Saturday. No one wants to like work on a Saturday and go like, did that launch right? No. Fuck. So maybe they'll squeeze it out on the 19th. There's supposed to be like a new level. There's supposed to be like, it's a gameplay mode called Get High. That leaked alongside, or when they announced what was going to be in season 3, they referenced this Get High thing. And people found access to it. People, have taken pictures of the Cheech and Chong skins in ways that seem like it should be impossible to do. So I imagine that it is people hacking the game to, find the skin assets and make them work or whatever. But the Get High thing has come and gone a couple of times. So it was something I thought was going to be, they were going to save till the 20th or something like that. But they put in a mode that it's like, well, it's like Bennett Foddy's game with the pot and the hammer, getting over it, or only up, which is the more recent, I think, the thing that they're making, because it's more of a polygonal 3D thing. And I've seen a lot of things in Fortnite that are exactly this as well, like people making Fortnite modes in the UEFN stuff. Yes, sexy hiking, right? Sexy hiking. But yeah, a lot like Only Up, or a lot like some of these other things that are, in Fortnite. But really, it's the idea of just like how, it's this gigantic structure of map, and how high can you get on this map before time expires? And you're in there with like 20 other players, and there are some targets to shoot along the way. But it's really just kind of an agility challenge of like, okay, slide under this, jump over this, and don't fall, and you'll occasionally hit checkpoints as you climb up this weird superstructure. And they did it all in this like Tron grid style, like Outrun fucking fake vaporwave. Like, it's got the stupid fucking sunset that all that shit has. It's got the grid, it's got the sunset. It's like they're going for that, which is, I feel like I was giving Call of Duty shit for chasing that dead ass aesthetic when fucking Black Ops Cold War came out, and they were, trying to make an 80s kind of thing then. And I was like, man, this aesthetic is so fucking played out. It's so, and now here we are, what, 2 years later, 3 years later, however long it's been, and to see them try it again, you're like, what the fuck is wrong with this? This shit is so played. Like, it didn't need to look this way. Like, your weird Get High mode did not need to look like this. This doesn't tie into, like, it doesn't look like weed. Not that it needs to, but it's just a weird set of choices there. I don't know why they would chase after that look in 2024. It's so it is deader than dead. Which maybe says something about Call of Duty, but I don't know. Season 3 of Call of Duty started, and as I have been launching it because I want to hear the voice lines that Cheech and Chong will say in Call of Duty. I need to know this. I have to know. I will probably stream some of it for the people, because I'm sure that there are other people who want to know who will not want to pay that money. I get it. I agree. So I will I promise to bring you that. I don't know. They've added some more maps, and because it's Weed Month, one of the maps is called Grow House. again, because weed. And there, there's some additional new maps in there as well. I think the new maps are good. I think that like they're, for a game that I think launched pretty bad, and I think for a game like it is, I can't think of a Call of Duty game in recent history that has launched with a worse set of maps, which is ironic because these are supposed to be remakes of classic maps from yesteryear. The catch is that Call of Duty has kind of changed in ways that make those maps less effective with the way the range of encounter, whatever. We talked about it back at the launch of Modern Warfare 3. So I won't rehash that entire thing over again, but I can't think of a Call of Duty game that at launch that I felt worse about the multiplayer maps in the game. And a lot of the stuff they've released since then, a lot of ones that are new or, some additional kind of reworks of other concepts and stuff have been pretty good. Like it's a pretty solid collection of locations and maps. Like it's, like with that stuff corrected, I think that the game is better. But it still doesn't hit as hard as Modern Warfare 2 did the previous year. And, all of that stuff. Like, obviously, there's still a lot of complicated ins and outs of that game that really just kind of suck. The indication is that Treyarch has maybe moved on, or that the zombie mode found in this year's game is largely kind of done getting major updates because the team that did that stuff is now working on this year's Call of Duty. So, much like DMZ, it seems like that mode has been maybe bailed on a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. I am, hey, of course I am, right? But I want to see how the Call of Duty experience evolves this year because of what they did with the current game in terms of like all the skins you purchased work in the following year, and all of these guns are still in the game, and like they did some work to unify things in ways that was actually kind of cool in some ways. But like now, if they're going to make a game that is like a Gulf War game, which is the talk, I guess, am I going to be able to play as Snoop Dogg, but as a literal dog inside the competitive multiplayer aspect of this year's Call of Duty game? Will this year's Call of Duty game debut on Game Pass? Presumably this year's Call of Duty game will show up at whatever Microsoft is going to do in June, when they have their showcase event. That would make sense. It's their game now, right? So, if maybe they'll do an ad on an NBA Finals, or like the old days. But I assume we'll be hearing about that game in a couple of months, right? More officially, but I'm curious because this will be the first like major, I guess so, right? Because Diablo was already out. This will be the first major Activision launch under Microsoft. And so how will that change in terms of how they offer the game? I wonder how that will change. Like what will be altered about the rollout, how information is conveyed about the game. I assume all that stuff largely stays the same because I think a lot of those people are still in place at Activision. So, they presumably would do what they've been doing. But in terms of it, will that game be a day one Game Pass launch? One would assume so, but also we haven't gotten the existing game on Game Pass, and so that's sort of weird. And I wonder if they're just going to ride it out at this point and say, okay, we're going to put out the new one on Game Pass, and then, yeah, we're going to add all the back catalog ones to Game Pass now too. But you don't want to play those anymore because they're not the new one, or or whatever it is. Will they? Yeah. Well, so yeah, Phil Bosch in chat brings up like maybe they make it so you only pay for the campaign like Halo. I don't think they'll do that because Warzone is already their carved off free to play thing, and so I think like when we talk about other platforms and PlayStation and what they'll do there, I don't think they'll just make all of the competitive multiplayer free to play as well. I don't think they need to. I think that's something that they could go ahead and sell as they've been doing. It's just like, what do they do on Xbox? And what do they do for people on Xbox who don't have Game Pass? You know, how do they just decide to sell it any differently there too? I don't think they will. And yeah, I would put the existing Call of Duty games on Game Pass. Like, I don't know what the holdup is in some ways. Like that's kind of the thing I'm curious about is like, why hasn't this happened already? And so that's why I say maybe they just wait until this year's game and that's when they make the shift. Because what else could they be waiting for? You know, like maybe they're just looking to spread them out and they're like, okay, Diablo's out the door. And so now let's get Call of Duty out the door. But the longer they wait on Call of Duty, the closer they get to the launch of the new one. And maybe that's exactly what they want is they're like, okay, we're going to put Modern Warfare 3 and 2 on Game Pass. And then, you know, you'll have a couple of months to get used to that. And then the new one will be out and it will launch on Game Pass and blah, blah, blah. Maybe that's the way that they're thinking about doing that. I don't know. I don't know what the logic or what the thinking is there. I would have thought that you would have been like, hey, everybody, this deal closed and it's all set. And like as ASAP, you are putting Call of Duty onto Xbox Game Pass at a minimum, if not also on PC Game Pass. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Why don't we take a little break here? We'll come back and we'll talk about Pokemon crimes, among other things, and Lawbreakers. I don't know. I don't know what we're doing anymore. It's heating up around here, and you know what that means? It's time to find some ways to keep cool at night. Well, I have just the solution for you right now. These silver-infused bed sheets from Miracle Made are exactly what you are looking for. They're inspired by NASA, and that silver infusion makes them temperature regulating. That means they have self-cooling properties that help you stay asleep longer and have better quality sleep. That thermoregulation keeps you at the perfect temperature all night long. And that silver is not just there to, you know, keep things cool and to keep you wondering about science. They also can prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. No more stank on them. It's nice. And, well, you know, a little less stank on them. Maybe you're washing them a little less, and that's, you know, saving some money and time on your laundry and all of that stuff. You're keeping bacteria off of your skin, which can cause breakouts and acne. Hey, sleep clean with Miracle. On top of all that, they are comfortable. Luxuriously comfortable, in fact, without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and they feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some 5-star hotels. You want to get in on this? You want to get in on this. Go to trymiracle.com/Jeff to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use the promo code Jeff at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Those towels, those are nice towels. I got some of those towels here. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you will get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Jeff and use the code Jeff to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Jeff to treat yourself. And thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring the episode. We're back, and it's time for the news. Pokemon hackers. They're out there taking your money, modifying your Pokemon, and getting arrested. This is all according to NHK News, as translated and posted by videogameschronicle.com. A Japanese man in Japan was arrested for modifying data in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and selling the modified data to players. This is a long running racket, right? This feels like something that kids probably made there's some enterprising child out there, maybe less so now that the 3DS servers are no more. But I'm sure that there was some enterprising kid out there that was like, trade me your Pokemon and give me $5 and I will modify its stats and trade it back to you. And then you'll be unbeatable. Right? That's basically what was happening here. That's apparently illegal in Japan, falling under what is called the Unfair Competition Prevention Act of 2019. That's right. Modifying save files and distributing edited data is illegal in Japan. Fucking what? The report here says the man has been using a special tool to modify the abilities of Pokemon, and then was selling them. Was selling hacked Pokemon for up to $85, and was taking custom orders and offering deals on rare Pokemon like 6 for $25. We got these fucking 2 for 5. The 2 for 5s is banging. We got a coughing and a wheezing over here. You're gonna be fucking set. And that the cops think that he made tens of thousands of dollars doing this. And hopefully we'll find out what the outcome is here. Apparently the maximum sentence here, or fine, is 5 years in prison or up to 5 million yen, which is about 32 grand. Is this guy going to end up going to prison for selling hacked Pokemon? That's my question. I don't have a good answer to that. I don't know. I don't know where Japan is at on some laws or whatever. But like, that's that's always the thing, right? If you're selling stuff, that is where they can prove damages. That is where they can that I think as true as here as it is over there. That the minute you start making money on a thing, that's when the lawyers are going to go like, I'm sorry, what now? What are we selling hacked Pokemon? Okay, all right. Is he just using Checkpoint and using 3D? Okay, all right. Let's get this fucker. And then what they need to do, Nintendo used to do this. There are images out there of like a guy in a Mario outfit driving like a fucking bulldozer, and he's like bulldozing a bunch of flash carts, a bunch of Game Boy flash carts and stuff. They should have a guy dressed up like Mario, like slapping handcuffs on this man. I mean, I guess it's the Pokemon company, so it's not purely Nintendo, but they should lock him up and throw away the key. I don't know, man. Who cares? Nintendo is so because like if there was a and there is something of an esports scene around Pokemon, right? They have their world championships, plenty of hallways to poop in, and all of this great stuff that the Pokemon games encourage. But also at the same time, Nintendo, okay, so this is maybe a larger conversation here. A thing I kind of came to realize over the last week or so. Nintendo paints itself as like we're fun. We're fun. The whole family can have so much fun, and it's fun, and we just like to, and when it comes to things like Smash Brothers esports tournaments and all this other stuff, they're like, we're about fun, man. We just want to, just have a good time. Like that stuff. We don't want you to use our name in this. We don't want you to, we don't want you to do any of that stuff. We're just about family fun and having a good time with the family. But Nintendo only wants you to have their specific brand of fun, their specific approved level of fun. They're not out here to they're like what was it? Like former Nintendo employees wanted to do like one of those Nuzlocke streams, and they were like, and Nintendo was like, absolutely not. We view those as like Nintendo viewed those streams as like somehow out of step and out of line with what their vision for Pokemon was, even though it's not necessarily modifying the game in any way, shape, or form. They looked at that as something that was outside of the scope of, like we don't want to acknowledge that these things exist. Like it's like there's a crazy, they're control freaks. They're not game freaks. They're control freaks. The 3DS servers have been completely shut down. We talked about this last week. The Wii U servers have also been shut down. And I was kind of like, okay, well, I think that sucks. And we talked about it last week, like, what do you even play online? I was like, oh, Mario Kart 7 on the 3DS. And, for me, it was the big one. For me, the big one was Mario Maker on the Wii U. And some folks piped up and said that there was a Monster Hunter and, that there's other stuff like that they wanted to play online. But as I kind of like ran down and thought about it, I was like, okay, well, it's a bummer that Splatoon 1 is going offline, but they've made more of those. And so, there are still fine ways to play Splatoon. And the one thing I didn't so I thought that my my exposure to this was pretty limited. It was like, well, Mario Maker is extremely unfortunate. Mario Maker is a great example of Nintendo only wants you to have their kind of fun. Like, oh, are you coming up with weird ways to use these tools to make levels in ways that we did not intend? We're going to erase them. We're not going to let you have fun. We're not going to encourage that. We're not going to find ways to allow for that. We are merely going to delete those levels from the server and maybe ban you from the game. Like, thanks. Oh, cool. Great. What fun. So, that's a huge loss. I think the Mario Maker thing is a massive loss. I think Mario Maker is one of the most important games of the last 15 years, 40 years. Fuck it. Until my daughter wanted to play Animal Crossing on the 3DS, which she's been doing off and on again lately. She kind of went back to, she abandoned the Switch in favor of the 3DS. She wanted to play Mario Kart 7 instead of 8 and whatever else. And she likes to play Animal Crossing New Leaf because that's the good one. And she mainly likes to do three things, and she is always strapped for cash as a result of this. She likes to drink coffee. She likes to get her hair cut. And she likes to do dreams. She likes to go to whatever the building is where you go and dream. And the dreams are you visiting other players' towns. Like you upload a snapshot of your town to Nintendo's servers, and then it's pulled down and you can interact with those characters in a quote unquote dream. And then you go back and you say, I want to wake up, and you wake up from your dream. And I forgot that my daughter really likes to do that because she hadn't done it a lot lately. She had mainly been focused on the haircuts and the coffee. And so she's sitting over here. She's not right now, but she was sitting over here playing her game. And she's like, what? And she's like, it doesn't work. What's going on? I need to read. She's getting better at reading all the time. She's a better reader than she gives herself credit for, but she's not there yet. And so she'll bring it over to me and ask me to help her figure out menus and stuff like that. And she goes, what's this? And she brings it over to me and I look at it. And in the top screen is the dream building. And she's trying to lay down on the bed to go do a dream. And on the bottom screen is an error message that says, this service has been concluded. Thank you for your understanding, or, whatever. Like, fuck. All right. So now I have to explain, oh, well, the dreams don't work. It's like, what do it's like, well, they don't, it doesn't. And so basically I told her that she was not going to be able to do that anymore. And she burst into fucking tears. And I'm like, God damn, shit, fucking Nintendo, you motherfuckers. And I'm like trying to explain to her, like, It's like you can't, you can't go like, well, the game's 10 years old. Well, it's old again, and this and that, um, and so she threw it down and ran into the other room, and eventually she kind of got over it, and the rest of the day happened, and she went upstairs and took her bath and got in bed and went to bed, and so she goes down about 6 p.m., something like that. About 7 o'clock. I have we have cameras in the rooms because it's a police state around here in the house, and so I can hear what's going on in her room. When we put her down, sometimes she'll spend 20 minutes jumping up and down in bed and yelling about Paw Patrol adventures or whatever. Her imagination is amazing. About 7 o'clock or so, she starts crying, like a lot. I'm like, all right, I've got to go up there. Like, I got to go up there. So I go up there. This is now hours later. I'm like, what's wrong? I'm thinking like, oh, maybe she has to go to the bathroom. Maybe she has to do, that. And she's like, I just remembered about the dreams again. I was like, fuck. I was so pissed at fucking Nintendo for it, like in that moment. And I still am fucking furious, because of this. It's like a totally understandable thing. It's a like, if you look at it on paper, like, yeah, it's a very old game. It makes sense to not support these servers anymore, all this other shit. But you're like, yeah, tell that to my fucking 4-year-old who is waking up in the middle of the night fucking bawling because you shut off the fucking Dreams servers. Now what? And so that only took a minute, and she went back to sleep, and it hasn't come up since. She hasn't wanted to play the game since, honestly. So it hasn't really come up either way. That night I spent some time. I have 3 3DSs here. The one that she played on used to be my wife's, and it was a stock legit 3DS. That is no longer the case. So what I did is I went and, this is something I was thinking about doing anyway, but I went and extracted the save file out of it, and I gave her however many bells you can have. It's like, it's close to 1 million or something like that. And so, yeah, I can't go to Japan anymore because they're going to throw me in the fucking slammer. And I gave her all the bells that I could give her so that she can go get haircuts forever. There are people out there that are trying to replicate a lot of this network functionality that Nintendo has just recently shut down, and some of it is there and some of it is not. The Animal Crossing stuff is not currently there. Maybe they will crack it someday and get it working again, but by then it will probably be too late. You can play Mario Kart 7 online if that's a thing you want to do on a 3DS. You can jump through some hoops and install some wild shit, and it will let you play Mario Kart 7 on the internet again, which is fascinating. It's great. It's awesome. It's awesome that people are doing this. But again, I feel weird even talking about that because Nintendo only wants you to have their brand of fun. So how long until those people get a knock on the door from lawyers shutting it all down again? I don't know. It's frustrating. It's all very frustrating. I don't know. There's a lot of, like, people are frustrated about The Crew, which is it's a laughable thing to be frustrated about in some sense, but the process and procedure here that Ubisoft is going through with The Crew is gross. The Crew shut down. The Crew won. There are now 3. Well, now there are only 2 Crew games: The Crew 2 and then Motor Fest or whatever it is. The Crew 3. The Crew 1 has been shut down. The servers have been shut off. It is a server-based game. There is no real offline mode in it. And so at that point, the game became unplayable to the point where it's just like, okay, well, that's it for the Crew 1. Apparently people that have the Crew 1 in their Uplay or whatever the fuck they're called, Ubisoft Connect libraries, have had the game removed from their library. So you can't even try to install it anymore. Which sets a terrible precedent. I saw another screenshot, and these are all screenshots, so I haven't seen widespread proof of this yet, but I wonder. Someone said they were able to get a refund on PSN, even though they had bought the game like 9 years ago or however long ago it was, because the servers were completely gone and the game was completely unplayable. They were able to get a full refund, which if you are a owner of the Crew 1, I recommend you look into that, because if they're gonna fucking take the game away from you, you should take the money back. That seems like that seems fair. I don't know. At minimum, they should be like, okay, well, here's a copy of the Crew 2. And then when they shut that down, they can give away a copy of the Crew 3 or something. I don't know. But it's a... Like, that's an extra step. Normally when games get delisted digitally, and not all games are going to be online server-based stuff, but normally when a game gets delisted, you can still go and download it. It's still in your library. It is still available to re-download. In fact, even though the Nintendo servers have been taken offline for the Wii U and 3DS, you are still able to go in and re-download your existing purchases, provided your 3DS has not been banned from their network for a variety of crimes. So yeah, I it's these are like, that's just taking a game out of your library, even if the game is non-functional. I feel like crosses a weird line, and I think it's really weird that they did it. And that seems like someone made a mistake somewhere, that if anyone at Ubisoft had sat down for longer than 20 minutes and said like, oh no, just leave it in the library. Like, we can shut the servers down, but like, yeah, they still own it, quote unquote. I don't know why. I don't know why they would jump through those hoops to do that as well. I think that's a really crazy step for them to jump through. And I'm sure that, yes, there's probably some EULA stuff that they use to try to protect themselves, but also, has that stuff really been tested in court successfully? It may be time to find out. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But the Animal Crossing thing really left a really sour taste in my mouth about Nintendo's practices specifically. Because like everyone else in this household, and I didn't try to force this on her, because if she wants to play it, I'm happy to allow her. But like everyone else in this household, she seems to really hate the current Animal Crossing on Switch for whatever reason. So it's not as simple as just like move forward to the new one and go do that stuff. Like, every time I've handed her this Switch version of Animal Crossing, she's messed with it for like a minute and been like, ugh, like, just doesn't want anything to do with it. And she'll never be able to figure out anything about the crafting or any of that other stuff. And so there's just, that game is so lacking in so many ways. It's such a disappointment. That even a 4-year-old can see through it and go like, ugh, give me the 3DS. Yeah, so I don't know. We'll see if this guy goes to jail for modifying Pokemon games. Speaking of hacking games and bringing them back in private servers and all kinds of other crazy business, Lawbreakers is back. I don't know why, but Cliff Bleszinski, who ran Boss Key Productions, the developer that made Lawbreakers, and then later on, what was that game? Radical Heights. I was going to say Retail Riot, but that's not the name of that game. That'd be a good name for that game. But Radical Heights was their bike-based battle royale game. I thought that game was cool. Lawbreakers is a competitive shooter, team-based, hero shooter with like a low gravity aspect to it that it was totally okay, but at the time when it came out, Overwatch was so ascendant and so dominant that there was zero interest in it. It got nailed to the wall faster than Battleborn did. And it's, the best thing I can say about Lawbreakers is it was okay. I don't know. Like, it certainly wasn't a terrible game, but like it was one of those games that the minute you play it, you're like, this isn't going to last like this. And it didn't. It got shut down about a year after its 2017 release. And now, again, according to videogameschronicle.com, some folks have gotten together and found a way to make it work again. They have issued a custom launcher for the game. You still have to install the game from Steam, which, if it's not in your library currently, you may have to jump through some hoops to get it. Well, I don't know if there's a way to get it into your Steam library now if it wasn't already there. And so I don't know with that aspect of this, I am not entirely certain about. I was able to make that work on my end, but I have some things I can do. And Cliff Bleszinski has been out on Twitter saying like, hey man, these guys are playing Lawbreakers. And I guess he's joined their Discord and he's there talking about Lawbreakers. And, it's the first time I can remember him talking a lot about a video game in kind of a while here. Seems like Cliff is mostly focused on Broadway and karaoke and his burgeoning stand-up career. Honestly, he's out there doing stuff. And his comic book. Cliff got into a ton of shit. People are always like, oh, well, that guy, what, but like, Cliff Bleszinski got into a ton of other shit. He's just like, oh yeah, no, I'm not at Epic now. And now I'm like doing all like 20 different things. And he seems like he's having a good time and doing a bunch of different shit. And so good on him, man. But yeah, Lawbreakers, these people have put together a launcher that will basically redirect the game to connect to custom servers. And they've re-implemented some aspect of of that server infrastructure. Nexon still owns the game. You might remember that Cliff was out on Twitter a while back saying that, it'd be cool if Lawbreakers could come back, and I'm going to talk to my lawyer. And then it ended up that Nexon still controlled the rights, and Nexon didn't want anything to do with it. Because why would you? I mean, if we're being real here and thinking about it from a business standpoint, Nexon's going to go look like, what? What? No, come on. And so these folks have started they're at, where are they? relb.org is where they have holed up, and they also have a Discord. If you go to that website, you will see a download button. The download button doesn't work. And I was like, what the fuck is happening here? I just want to try this thing. I managed to reinstall Lawbreakers on Steam, but I can't. I need to download their launcher in order to make this thing work. What the hell is going on? And I spent about a day going like, is it my browser? Do I need to try a different browser? Do I need to turn off some extensions to make this work? And none of it could make the download button work. And then I took a look at their Discord, and apparently they were just running it as a temporary test. And they're like, oh yeah, the download link will go back up when we're ready to test again, or something like that. So it is not something you could go play right this minute if you are within the sound of my voice, but they are saying that they will do another test eventually here. And so I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. The Titanfall 2 custom server stuff was really awesome when that came around, especially at a time when you could not play that game the legit way because hackers were breaking it for a really long time. The custom stuff that they did for Titanfall 2 was rad. And so I don't know, like I'm sure I'll play some more Lawbreakers. But I don't remember it being I don't remember that game being something that I felt would last at the time. And I was right. You know, the player count didn't get it done, and before too long, after about a year or so, it was gone. And it was not a free to play game. They were selling access to it, and it came out at a time when free to play might have led to a different situation for them, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, the game was fine. It's a shooter. It's a, objectives and stuff like that you would see in a competitive shooter, a small scale hero shooter-esque kind of thing, with some low gravity shenanigans in certain parts of the map. So yeah, but I will happily give it another look when and if it goes back online. Maybe if Nexon had gotten some tips from players, maybe things would have gone differently. Oftentimes I am a little hesitant to simply react to some shit a dude said on Twitter, regardless of who said dude is. But this one is just the kind of detached from reality that you just sort of look at and go like, Mike Ybarra, who you may remember as recently as running Blizzard. Prior to that, he did a good long run at Xbox. Got out on Twitter and said, I've thought about this idea for a while as a player since I've been diving into single-player games lately. Hang on, I'm loading the full thing here. When I beat a game, there are some that just leave me in awe of how amazing the experience was. At the end of the game, I've often thought, I wish I could give these folks another $10 or $20 because it was worth more than my initial $70 and they didn't try to nickel and dime me every second. Games like Horizon Zero Dawn, God of War, Red Dead Redemption 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring, etc. I know $70 is already a lot, but it's an option. At the end of the game, I wish I had at times. Some games are that special. I know most will dislike this idea. By the way, I realize we are tired of tipping and everything else, but I view this different from a pressure to tip type scenario many face and give feedback on. Just sell stuff. That's an already solved problem, right? Like, make DLC, do a soundtrack. Like, there are games that have merchandise that you could buy. But like, if companies want to have additional monetization on top of the retail sell, come up with something good and sell it. Whether that's DLC or, you can, plenty of indie games. And so I guess like the part that I find so egregious about this are the games that he's citing. Red Dead Redemption 2. I wish I could give those fucking guys at Rockstar just a little bit more money because that game was so good. What? Where's that money gonna go realistically? That scrappy young guys over there at Rockstar pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and like, if only we could have your support. Elden Ring, these games with like massive fucking budgets and extremely large teams. Like, yeah, I wish I could. Like, I get it, like, hey man, I really liked Life Eater, so I bought this. Like, whatever. There are plenty of indie games where I do think that, like, if they sold an extra thing or something, I would buy it on principle. Or sometimes there are free to play games where I go like, I like this game and I didn't spend any money on it. So I will pump $60 into the currency of this game, and because I feel like I had that level of experience with it. I think that like those sorts of things where you are getting something back and maybe not outlaying a bunch of money up front makes a little bit of sense. But the idea of saying like, oh, the Horizon team could sure use another $10 and counting on these major publishers to actually take that tip money and give it to the people that made the game, as opposed to just like, yeah, this falls right to the bottom line. This is just extra fucking money we got. This is great. We love this idea. It's crazy. That's the guy who was running Blizzard. You know what I mean? Buy the game for a friend. I know someone who I don't know how many copies of Psychonauts she bought for other people. But it was a lot. Yeah, I don't know, buy a copy for a console. Get one for your friends. Like if a game has some microtransactions and you like it enough, or you are playing enough of it, then you could put a little more money into it. That would be okay. Get Cheech Chong in Call of Duty if you like Call of Duty. Don't go, I spent $110 on the Vault Edition, whatever. Like, boy, I sure did like Star Wars Outlaws, and sure I did already spend $110 to get 3 days of early access and this Jabba the Hutt quest, but I liked it so much, I wish I could just put some more money in the Mr. John Ubisoft's pocket. What are you telling me? His name is not John? His name is, okay, Jacques Ubisoft? Fine. Put these francs in his pocket. What? Euros? What are we doing? I think there are situations with small games, with indie games, with small teams and so on and so forth, where they have built these kind of communities, and those sorts of situations make a little bit more sense. I think donating money to a public company, I'll put it to you this way in terms of my stance on this. When we started an independent company and started doing subscriptions, it was very transactional. It was like, okay, we're going to try to do these subscriptions and try to give you actual content for your subscription because you're paying for it. But also we were an independent company, and there were situations where some people would want to donate more and whatever. And you're like, okay. When our independent company was acquired by a major media corporation, we removed the option to give us additional money because the thought of donating money to fucking CBS is so stupid. You just look at it and go like, no, like in good conscience, like this isn't like, like, no, you're owned by a real company that is trying to do a thing, like sell something. You're independent operator and all this other stuff. I think the rules are a little bit different, and I think that makes a ton of sense. And I think that there are a lot of things like that out there, and whatever else. But like yuck. Anyway, I just conceptually that whole thing just sounds gross. And it's specifically because he cites again, Horizon, Elden Ring, buy the Elden Ring DLC. Even if you don't intend to play it. If you think that Elden Ring is a good game, when they go and they sell you more of it, buy it. Simple. That's the model for a reason. Horizon even sold DLC. Ill-advised, I think, but they did it anyway. But hey, I just it's again, like it's not a news. It's it's a guy who used to work a couple of places. I don't know what Mike Ybarra is doing right now. I don't know where has he landed somewhere. I'll click through again and we'll see what his bio has to say about this. No currently listed no currently listed position. Okay. There's a kind of a little bit, The Verge just published a couple of stories about the PlayStation 5 Pro stuff, and the bulk of it is everything that we talked about a few weeks ago. So I don't know if they just didn't run those stories and now they're kind of playing catch up on it or what, but like there's perhaps a little bit of new information here in terms of how the submission process will work for third-party developers when it comes to working with this stuff. And it lines up very clearly with what I remember hearing about the PS4 Pro, about how the Sony process kind of changed here. Hang on, is this the right? So Tom Warren has this story at The Verge. He says the one thing here is, I understand developers are able to order test kits right now, and that Sony is expecting every game submitted to CERT in August to be compatible with the PS5 Pro. And then he goes on to say that, other reports had indicated that the console will be out this holiday. Which seems to be the case. I think a lot of people have been reporting something in the November timeframe when it comes to PS5 Pro. It has not been announced at this time. But at this point, much like when the PlayStation 4 Pro had not been announced, like we saw all this exact same stuff in terms of developer documentation. And a lot of it is documentation of like how the boost will work. And like, oh, here's how if you were not going to do a full update to your game, you can still unlock your frame rate and do this to patch this to take advantage of the boost mode that we will have on the PS5 Pro, which is very similar to how the PS4 Pro worked. And very similar to how they framed a lot of that stuff in their documentation there. The other thing the Verge story kind of points out here is that Sony appears to be encouraging developers to use graphics features like ray tracing more with the PS5 Pro, with games able to use a it's currently, the device is currently codenamed Trinity because they can't fucking get away from this Matrix stuff. But it is Trinity Enhanced, which will probably eventually be PS5 Pro Enhanced label if they, quote, provide significant enhancements. So if you're going to run better on a PS5 Pro, you get a little extra sticker to put on your box. Everyone loves to get stickers on their box. And that's kind of it. I don't know. Like a lot of the story is just kind of reiterating a lot of stuff that's been going around for a couple of weeks now. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Is it selling well? It depends on how you crunch the numbers, I suppose. We'll have to see what Square eventually says about it. But Daniel Ahmad, who is the Director of Research and Insights at Nico Partners these days, not just on Twitter, has a real job on top of all of that sort of stuff. Has been out there. This is, again, Video Games Chronicle reporting on this stuff. But Ahmad said, Rebirth is underperforming sales-wise. It's selling about half of what Remake sold in the same time frame, and looks like it will have a weaker tail prior to any kind of PlayStation Plus style re-release. This is, I guess, like, this seems logically sound to me, right? The big Final Fantasy VII remake comes along and everyone goes and buys it. It's a big successful hit. All these years waiting, and then now a few years later, we get part 2 of it. I imagine that a lot of that demand has been sated. where people are like, oh, yeah, I played it already. I played the first remake. They did it already. Yeah, it was good. It was really good. I loved it. Oh, should I play this? Yeah, I guess. Like, I bet that there's just not as much of a demand, like a pent up rage about like, they need to remake this game. But also the thing to remember is that game came out on PS4, and when Final Fantasy VII Remake came out on PlayStation 4, it was like available to something like 100 million players or 100 million devices, if you want to assume that a lot of people double dipped. That the install base of the PS4 was something like 100 million units, whereas the PlayStation 5 and this second chapter is not on the PS4. There are about 50 million PlayStation 5s out there in the marketplace. So when he says it's selling about half of what Remake sold in the same time frame, you go, okay, well, there's about half as many PS5s out there. So obviously that's not a perfect apples to apples comparison, and all that stuff's not going to be perfect science, but like you look at it and go, yeah, that sounds about right. I also have to imagine that this game was less expensive for them to make than the first one, as a result of they already did all of the engine work and everything they needed to do up front. And so this second game was probably a lot less expensive for them to make. And the third one probably will be as well. It sounds like in terms of the third one, they are out there, Square's out there saying that the story is pretty much done and that they're just about ready to start recording VO for it. We'll see how long it takes them to turn that one around. Yeah, I don't know. It's like, my point is that's a lot of people were kind of trying to throw that around as like, oh, it's the sky, this Final Fantasy, like trying to make that a bigger deal than, like, I just kind of read it and went like, yeah, okay. Like, yeah, you got a PS4 game versus a PS5 game. You have some people that haven't bought a PS5 yet. You have half as many PS5s out there in the marketplace. You have people that know it will eventually come to PC and maybe they're waiting for that. There are just a lot of reasons why. Also, it's the I have to play this on day one thing. I think is a lot less lessened. Is significantly lessened by virtue of like the first one existing already. You can only say here's our Final Fantasy VII, even though they're making 3 games. You can really only kind of say here's our Final Fantasy VII remake once and get the big like, oh my god, and they got it, with that first game. So I don't know, like none of this seems super surprising, or like any kind of like, oh, games are doomed or any kind of, it's just like you look at it and go, yeah, it's a different situation. You could also probably tie in some pandemic timing based issues around people having time to play it, yes or no sort of stuff, a little bit, but not quite. Doesn't quite line up. We were still in an office when that game came out, I think, right? Or was it just when previews were coming out? Anyway, whatever. Nintendo has decided to skip Gamescom 2024. That's a statement they have issued to Gameswirtschaft, a German publication. Again, according to videogameschronicle.com, your home for video game and news. My home for video game and news. Again, it's that, it's Eurogamer, it's Polygon, and it's Kotaku. Those are kind of my top 4 for like what's going on in like the kind of mainstream game news thing. There's obviously a lot of other stuff happening out there that you can pluck from and see in a lot of different places, but like generally speaking, they're all doing solid jobs out there. Like Gameswirtschaft, for example. Nintendo has not given an official statement on this outside of this German publication, but they are claiming a spokesperson for Nintendo had said that they will not be an exhibitor at the event. They did show up last year. Of course, you know, the prevailing theory at that point is, well, yeah, if they're going to launch a new console, but they're not ready to talk about it yet, then that would make sense. When are they going to announce that they have a new console in the works? Are they going to try to wait to, you know, if that thing is going to come out early next year, then they're kind of have to find some point to talk about it. Maybe they could wait until fall. I'm trying to think when they had finally announced the Switch and then when it came out. It was a pretty tight turnaround, all told, compared to how a lot of other consoles had done it up to that point, I suppose. But that also means that they're not going to get out there and advertise games for the existing Switch, which seems to be the other kind of like what's going on at Nintendo stuff is like, okay, is Metroid Prime 4 coming out for the original Switch, or has it been bumped to the next one? Will it be a dual? Will it be a split generation game? Will it run in boost mode on a Switch 2 and, you know, like whatever else? I don't know. And some of that stuff I don't care enough to speculate about, to be honest. I'm curious to see what they're doing for sure. But when it comes to the existing Switch lineup and the existing things that they have announced as Switch games, which, you know, there's still some stuff out there. You know, I would not be shocked if most of that stuff also appeared on the follow-up in some form, or if it only appeared in some cases. But yeah, I don't know. The Switch is old at the end of the day. The Switch now feels like a very old device. Nintendo does a better job of hiding it than most, especially, you know, when you look at the third-party games that appeared on the Switch. Speaking of which, Nintendo's third-party division in the U.S. just gained a fucking hard-hitting motherfucker. Gio Corsi went over there to work on their third-party team. He was most recently at Iron Galaxy, and of course was at PlayStation. He somehow became synonymous with the PlayStation Vita, but in a good way, which is an interesting feat. He also worked on Star Wars 1313 before that got killed. I found my Star Wars 1313 t-shirt that I got at E3 the year that they showed that and got super fucking bummed out. Because that game looked, I'm not even like a massive Star Wars guy, but like that game looked cool as hell. Conceptually, it looked really neat. What they were showing at E3 that year was like, it was kind of the talk of the show. And I slipped in to see it at kind of the last minute. And it was one of those, Cyberpunk took up this spot for a couple of years, but there would be like that game at the show that was not being shown on the show floor. It was appointment only. And you would hear about it early on when someone would take the appointment and they'd go like, you need to fucking see this thing. And as word would spread, all of those appointments would get filled up or like double, triple, quadruple booked to the point where they're just like cramming as many people in this room as they can. And so like on day 3 of E3 that year, I managed to slip in and get a quick demo, and see what they were showing of the game, and was like, I was like, no, I get it. Like, I get why people are fucking losing it. It's not just because it's some Star Wars thing. Like, it genuinely looked like a cool ass shooter with some cool ass Star Wars stuff in it, as well. So yeah, it's disappointing that 1313 never happened. I was going to say someone should dust that off and resurrect it, but I don't know how much a game was like ultimately, you know, it's not like there was a fully complete game there. And yes, of course, history repeats itself. Respawn's Star Wars game just got killed not that long ago. And I feel like everything that had come out about that, everything that had leaked about that, and just like hearing some of the excitement from people who were on that title. Again, not a Star Wars guy, but like I'm always down to play a great Star Wars game. So Uh, the Respawn thing is a super fucking bummer. Star Wars 1313 was also a major bummer. But hey. At least we've got this to carry us through. At least we know that we all have to make it until at least December 20th, because that will be the release date of the film Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Which will feature, as the voice of Shadow the Hedgehog, Keanu Reeves. This is according to The Hollywood Reporter. I think that's great. I want to, it's great, but also at the same time, one would expect that Keanu Reeves will sound like Keanu Reeves sounds in most things these days. And the idea of that voice coming out of Shadow the Hedgehog, who I assume will have to be armed, because if you are not going to portray Shadow the Hedgehog as a guy with guns, then why would you get Keanu Reeves, a guy who in recent history is known for playing a guy with guns? I assume that they will just have him talk as much like John Wick as possible, which, again, I think that the internet has poisoned my thoughts on Shadow the Hedgehog, in that I now think he just sounds like the most brooding emo kid in the world. The game was always kind of like that, but not quite. But like, that has been the thing that has been quadrupled down on by the internet so fucking hard that now I just think of Shadow as like a fucking, yeah, I don't know. I guess he always was kind of that. He always was kind of that, but they took it to such extremes. And I think it is an extreme move to get Keanu Reeves to get it there and do the voice. That is, well, that seems like something I should see. I hate to say it. I think that they should sell. I can't have been the first person to say this, but they need to sell something that I can bolt on to the films Sonic 2 and 3 to put Knuckles into Sonic 2. They need to re-release the film Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and replace Sonic with Knuckles. But you can only access it if you take you have to do a swap trick on a Blu-ray drive and take the 3-disc out and put take the, when they put the Knuckles TV show out or something, I feel like there's a thing to do there that would be like fun for the fans, but would also be a commercial fucking nightmare of like, well, if you buy all of this stuff, then yes, if you buy literally all of these films, then we will allow you to watch this bonus feature of 20 minutes of this film, but with only Knuckles in it. We've replaced every polygonal model in this film with Knuckles. Maybe that would be the way to do it. I don't know. Maybe that would be the way to do it. I don't know. That just seems like good casting to me. I don't know. Idris Elba, that seems like that's a good, fun casting choice as well. I don't know. At least it's not Chris Pratt. Fallout 4, back in the news. Everyone's big on Fallout all of a sudden, all over again. This has been interesting because it feels like we don't necessarily always see this when games come to television. There isn't always a product that can be updated, or like Sony did okay with The Last of Us in terms of, well, we've got to remaster this thing and get it out and do this and that. Sonic, they have not done a great job of having like new Sonic games that are aligned with the film. Sonic Frontiers was all right. I don't know. For what it was. Twisted Metal is another case where Sony, well, it seemed like Sony wanted to do something there and then maybe it just didn't come together, is perhaps the thing there. And so to that, I would say, yeah, it's because it's Twisted Metal. It's because whatever. I'm not going to. Twisted Metal was always a franchise with a short shelf life, and as controls changed, there was no longer a need for that style of car combat game. They were always kind of bad. As much as I liked Vigilante 8, and as much as Twisted Metal 2 was an amazing game in its day, we do not have room for that anymore. And so, despite the Twisted Metal TV show being successful from the sounds of things, someday I'll watch the Twisted Metal show. Maybe? I don't know. That doesn't sound immediately appealing. But it sounded like that it was better than expected for sure. So I don't know. Anyway, that all leads up to this. Fallout, the television show, is out. It is being quite well received, I would say, in a general sense. People are like, oh, actually, this is pretty good. The Easter eggs don't necessarily get in the way of the storytelling. You can still enjoy it even if you don't give a fuck about the Fallout games, but the stuff that's there is actually kind of nice, and so on and so forth. They are going to update Fallout 4. They don't have a new Fallout game ready for this. That would have been a weird shadowed, like, oh, by the way. One of the things that has been, and I will admit to you that I have not, I've seen snippets of Fallout, and I have not actually sat down and truly engaged with the television show. But one of the things that I found very frustrating about some of the coverage of it were people saying, like, it's like Fallout 5. Like, God, I hope not. Because the cool thing about Fallout is the part where it's a video game. And so if you can make a full-on sequel to Fallout without any of the interactivity on it, that's kind of a bummer. I would be interested in a Fallout 5, but also I think they've gone so far down the rabbit hole on some of the base building features they did for 4 and everything, and that they've used similar forms in some of their other games, that I just look at and go, Fallout is maybe, give me a Fallout New Vegas 2. I'll take that instead. Anyway, Fallout 4 is getting updates. They are going to release native versions for current consoles. That includes the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X/S. They will get performance mode and quality mode settings, because even all these years later, they can't fucking do both. It's Fallout 4. Well, maybe the updates are amazing, and that's why. But hey. So yes, native applications as well as stability improvements and fixes experience up to 60 frames per second and increased resolutions. Oh, up to 60 frames. So not 60 frames. You're telling me this game that came out all of these years ago, you're optimizing it to run on current consoles, but it's still not just going to run at up to 60. Maybe if you put it in performance mode. That does not sound amazing. This is... Look, okay. Before we... Look. I'm actually interested in this. There is some part of me that does want to go back and revisit Fallout 4 and see it running properly. Because I played it on a PlayStation 4 at launch, and it did not run properly. Fallout 4 players on PS4 and Xbox One will also receive a free update with stability improvements, login, and quest fixes. You telling me all these years later, when did Fallout 4 come out? It's a trillion years ago. 2015. So 9 years. 9 years later, After 9 years, you're going to issue an update to the game. The version that everyone bought back on PS4 and Xbox One. 9 years later, an update that includes quest fixes. Because you didn't fix them all already. The game still needs quest fixes 9 years later. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, because I'm sorry, I have not followed the blow by blow, like what's gone on with Fallout in the last 9 years. Like, I reviewed it. That game was a fucking mess on console. Like, in some places, disastrously so. I encountered a ton of messed up quest bugs. The performance was fucking dog shit in a lot of places in that game. You're telling me that when this update hits, it's going to include quest fixes for that version of the game? I just... That you didn't do that already. That hadn't been fixed yet. That just had been lingering. At some point, you just go like, well, we got another game to make. And I get it. Like, hey, yeah, you got another fucking game to make. That sucks, dude. Again, even as someone who is, I'm like generally excited about, that's kind of cool that they're doing updates to Fallout 4. Maybe I should go back and look at that again. I don't know. See what the mod scene ever turned into on that and see if it would be a good time. But Jesus. Updates for the PC. We're also releasing a free Fallout 4 update for PC players. Experience Fallout 4 on your next generation PC. Okay. What? Okay. Experience Fallout 4 on your next generation PC with widescreen and ultra widescreen support. Did the game... Okay, ultra widescreen, I get it. Like, you probably did not ship that game with 21.9 support because who cares? I can name one person I know that cares about 21.9 support. And he's busy. Widescreen support? Clearly, Fallout 4 did launch with widescreen support, right? I mean, I don't remember that game running in 4:3. Anyway, as well as fixes to Creation Kit, which is their modding tool set, and a variety of quest updates. So, players with PC versions of Fallout 4 on Steam, Microsoft Store, and GOG will receive stability, mods, and bug fixes. For Japanese and Chinese players on PC, Bethesda.net login issues have been resolved, fixing access to mods. And it will come out on the Epic Games Store, and it will be Steam Deck verified, which is kind of cool. Assuming it can run well enough on there. I mean, I don't know. That's worrisome. The idea of Fallout 4 on a portable device, that sounds appealing. I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. But again, given the performance history of those games and all of that sort of stuff, that doesn't immediately sound like it would be great. We'll see. But I will probably look at that again. I like the player counts on all the Fallout games, even going all the way back to Fallout 1, have been up as a result of just this increased discussion of Fallout and the popularity of the television show and everything. And so, it's great that some of that stuff's been on sale, and so players are going to go play New Vegas for the first time, and that's hopefully great. I don't know. Like, I don't know if the out of the box experience on New Vegas is great, or if you're like really forced to mod it to get it running properly these days. I don't know where that stuff got left at, but and I always, much like Elder Scrolls Online, I think Fallout 76 has also fallen into a similar bucket for me of like games I would be interested in going back and taking a look at someday. Fallout 76, I mostly played it near launch. And I thought about going back to it when they added NPCs, but never, it was just like, whatever. I don't know. Fallout is good, but Fallout is also very frustrating when we think about, like, Fallout 3 was amazing at the time, even if the ending of it was ridiculous. New Vegas is a great game. Fallout 4 had its moments of just, I think of the like worlds in which Bethesda makes games, and we'll include Starfield in that now. The one I think I am like most aligned with, or most like, if I had to pick one that I would like to see them like really just knock it out of the park. Like, hey, we made this amazing sequel to this thing, and we put all our resources and all this attention and love and all that, we made this thing. Like, Fallout is the one. It's not Elder Scrolls, and it's certainly not Starfield. I would love to see them make an outstanding Fallout game. Because it's been a while at this point. What's gonna do for the news? Yeah, it's yeah. I get bummed out when I talk about Fallout, because it's like the sort of thing that just like, it feels like a situation that should be going down better, and then at the same time, like, those games sell fine and people are all excited about them, and they put Bethesda on this pedestal, and I don't think that Bethesda has earned that pedestal in a very long time. Like, since Skyrim, really. It's, but I would also, yeah. Oblivion's a great game. Oblivion is a game that changed things when it came to role-playing games on consoles. It was janky. It certainly wasn't as janky as Morrowind on an original Xbox, but Oblivion was one of those right place, right time games that like joined in with the early days of the Xbox 360, and it just seemed like I think it changed the way a lot of people think about what types of games you can succeed with on console as well. Because when Morrowind came out on the Xbox, it was like one of those weird technical feats, and you're like, it's crazy that they did this, and the people who were into it were way into it, but it didn't, I don't know, that game didn't feel, much like other games on the original Xbox. It just didn't feel like it was attracting like a massive, like, world-changing number of people. But Oblivion was fucking huge, man. It's hard to yeah, I don't, like, Oblivion felt like a shift in the culture, if you will, for players that only play it on consoles. It's another one of those situations where, on the PC you would probably been playing a lot of role-playing games for years and years and years, and that wasn't necessarily as big of an impact there. But for console players, Oblivion is to like role-playing as like GoldenEye was to like first-person shooters in its era. Maybe that's the right way to put it. And so I bet, much like GoldenEye is a game that is like fucking incredibly difficult to go back to, I bet Oblivion is pretty creaky these days. Especially on a console where you can't mod it to fix it. Why don't we get into some emails? We were talking about Bond games on the Discord last night. And just how ridiculous the James Bond video game franchise really is. over the years, you know, with all of the, you know, especially post GoldenEye and the weird chase to always try to get back to GoldenEye because of how powerful and how popular that game was. And how EA was smart to, I feel like EA did, as far as like people having the Bond license, EA's games were very hit and miss. But EA took some weird chances, at least, before they kind of hit upon a formula that worked for a little while and then fucked it all up. Where they had like, they made 007 Racing. They made a car game set in the James Bond universe. You're like, what? Why? What is, I mean, you know, there are certainly cars in the James Bond. You know, hey, 007 Racing makes exactly as much sense as James Bond as a first-person shooter, I guess. If you're just going to reduce the James Bond, if you're going to take a single dimension of James Bond and go like, sometimes he has a gun, let's make a whole game about that, I guess. Like, sometimes he drives a car. Great. Let's get one of our racing teams. Like, what's Eutechnics doing? Nothing? Great. Have them make a James Bond game. But, you know, they only make driving games. What are you talking about? Like, yeah. Yeah, no, cars. They do cars. James Bond loves cars. We'll get the Aston Martin people on the phone. We'll figure it out. And so, you know, presumably that's exactly how that game was born. I don't know. Well, like Everything or Nothing was a James Bond game that felt like it cared about James Bond a little more whole cloth. And it just reminded me about like, man, I hope that IO Interactive, IO Interactive seems like they're poised to nail James Bond in a way that it's never been done before and actually make a decent fucking spy game. And I'm not even like a big James Bond guy, but it's like there's something cool about, fuck it, man. You could make a burn notice. I don't even give a shit, man. Make a good spy game. Is it Alpha Protocol 2? Is it a good James Bond game? Like fucking whatever, man. Take the Hitman mechanics and put it in something else. I'm there. I don't give a shit what name you write on it. So yeah, I don't know. High hopes for whatever IO Interactive is doing with the license, but you know, Everything or Nothing, and there were a few other Bond games at EA that were decent, but I feel like Everything or Nothing was like the new blueprint that they hit upon, and then didn't duplicate it. Did not best that game with the rest of their time with the license, and then eventually, you know, they're just like anyone else, and just like Activision, who would get the license after. It eventually just sunk back into, I don't know, man, let's make first-person shooters because everyone just says they want GoldenEye. And it's just such a shitty goal. It's such a short-sighted goal as well. But and then they finally did start and they made their new GoldenEye and no one gave a shit. There you go. We're putting it out on the Wii because it originally was an N64 game, and we think that people never jump brands. Sure, I guess. Why not? That's a thing that you could do with a Wii remote. If that's why I don't know why you would. I don't know why you would do that, but you sure could. They sure did. Bloodstone, yuck. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. We were talking about the James Bond games on the Discord last night. It got me just thinking about all that stuff and thinking about oh, I've got email. Whew. This is from the Supergiant Games email list here. It just says Hades 2, soon. We're getting close to launching Hades 2 in early access. A key step prior to that is our Hades 2 technical test, which we plan to begin shortly. Wow. You can sign up for access on there. I'm going to go. It's one of those things where they've got a thing on Steam where you can go hit request access and maybe get a chance to be in it. And so I'm going to go click that button. It says your interest has been registered. Okay. Wow. I guess, yeah, I had not considered that Hades 2 would be soon. But here we are, I suppose. I guess it's already April. Let's get into some emails here. Someone in chat said that X-Defiant beta invites were starting to go out as well. So I guess they've got a test coming up. There was a date leaked earlier this week that made it sound like it was like end of this week or something, like coming up pretty soon, that they were going to do another X-Defiant test. Kind of the first thing we've heard about that game officially in kind of a while, though there has been quite a bit of reporting around what the fuck is going on with X-Defiant that makes it sound like a bad place to be. Much like a lot of other parts of Ubisoft. It sounds like it does not sound like a fucking great place to work. It does not sound like the great people have been in charge of that project. It sounds like maybe great people are not great people are in charge of Ubisoft still. Despite them saying, we're going to get to the bottom of this and we know Ubisoft's culture needs to change and blah, 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 blah. And here we are. podcast@guard.bike is the email address. You can send in your emails. All right, sorry. Well, I was just checking a new one that came in and seeing if it was any good, and we're not going to go with that one. But yes, send in your emails to me, and we'll take a look at them. Patrick writes in and says, when Games for Windows Live was around, I was exclusively playing on consoles. What made it so terrible? How does it compare to today with many publishers having their own DRM injected into games? Games for Windows Live was a lot of the stuff that made Games for Windows Live kind of shitty is now just built into current Windows. And it's a lot better now. There were just a lot of people that had a lot of technical issues with getting it working, but like generally what Games for Windows Live was kind of, it was bringing aspects of the Xbox experience to PC. And so what they wanted is to have an overlay that you could pop out, just like you could have the blades on Xbox, to kind of pull out and look at your achievements. And it offered crossplay in some games like Shadowrun. And, it created a framework for them to bring some of their ideas with, that they had on the Xbox to the PC. So stuff like Viva Pinata, Shadowrun. There was a handful of third-party games that supported it. I want to say Tekken Cross Street Fighter Cross Tekken was a Games for Windows Live game as well. But it created online servers. Like it was basically like an online activation server for your serial number. Yes, Fallout 3 was a Games for Windows Live game. But it was more or less an activation and authentication server that worked with your serial number. Sort of like how, Denuvo games would have activation limits and some of that other stuff. Like they would kind of check that out there. So they used it as DRM in a lot of ways, but also it was trying to provide services to players along the way. So whereas Denuvo offers you jack fuck other than, minus 5% performance or whatever it is, Games for Windows Live was at least trying to bring aspects of the Xbox Live experience to the PC, which nowadays that just exists. And that's all just kind of built right in. And sometimes you redeem a serial number and it works in both places. If you buy a game digitally, sometimes it works in both places. You have Game Pass for sale on both platforms and so on and so forth. So a lot of that stuff is just unified now. But back then, they had to build it into every game. And so they basically had to go and build this Games for Windows Live kind of client and overlay that would install with every game. You would have to try to log into an Xbox Live account along the way. And sometimes people ran into technical issues around that stuff, and it did not work very well. But it was not, like, conceptually, it was not a terrible idea. It was just half-baked. I mean, you could argue that the Xbox implementation on Windows 11 still has a long way to go. So half-baked back then is maybe overstating it. Maybe it's a quarter-baked or whatever. The execution was just not where it needed to be. And then it just kind of, since it didn't really take off and didn't really go anywhere, they never made it any better. And so it just was this kind of crummy, weird hassle that you had to deal with some of your games, where you had to log into an account to verify that you owned it and blah, blah, blah. And you would get achievements in PC games. In fact, in Fallout 3, you could pull down the console and just type in, like, get achievement 1, get achievement 2, get achievement 3, and just get all the achievements. It was awesome. We contacted Bethesda about it, and they kind of wrote back an email that was basically a shrug, you know, in so many words. Pete Hines just wrote back and just kind of went like, in a way that sounded like, yeah, if you want to do that to your achievements, I guess fucking, like, this is what I remember the vibe sounding like in terms of how much they cared about the sanctity of achievements or whatever else. And so I got all the PC achievements for Fallout 3 and that was about that. No, I don't, you know, again, like, that was happening at a time that I thought achievements were kind of cool. And so achievements being a part of something on PC, I thought was a neat idea. But a lot of people did run into, or, you know, like, a vocal minority. I don't have the numbers. I don't know how many people ran into trouble, but, like, anecdotally, it seemed like the only thing you ever heard people talking about with relation to games for Windows Live was that it fucking sucked and barely ever worked. I never really had any major issues with it from a technical standpoint, like that you install the games and it worked, and I already had my Xbox Live account and stuff like that. So, you know, I just was able to punch those numbers in and do it, and it was not a big deal. But yeah, a lot of people ran into technical problems with some of that stuff along the way. And that's unfortunate. Derek writes in and says, Derek from Toronto writes in and says, I caught your video of Maniac, which is kind of a cool game, and your comments on flamethrowers in games. What games do you think have the best ones? Mine is maybe Noida, if magic counts. Yeah, the fire stuff, the fire tech in Noida is cool as hell. Noida is a cool game. And part of that is the fluid and smoke and fire and the way all of that stuff works. Great flamethrowers in games. Yeah, Far Cry, like the flamethrower in Far Cry 3 was not, like, amazing to use, but it was a very fun mission where you used it and burned down all the drug fields, and Skrillex was performed, and yeah, Far Cry 2, some people are saying as well, had a good flamethrower. I believe that. I think in terms of just, like, fire tech, my go-to when we talk about fire in video games was always Treyarch. It was always Treyarch's Call of Duty games. That was something that really set their games apart from the games that Infinity Ward was making, is that when World at War and some of their other games came along, there was just a level of fidelity to the fire in World at War and, like, Black Ops and some of that shit. It wasn't always a flamethrower, though there was a mission in World at War where you did have a flamethrower and it was fucked. It was fucked because the way that fire acts in that game was really good. It was really good. So that's always kind of been my go-to, has been, like, that era of Call of Duty when Treyarch kind of first started leading games on their own. The big standout thing there, and they pointed it out themselves. It was something that they were like proud of, and they knew that they had something special. But it wasn't just some marketing gimmick. It wasn't like they were like, and the fire, like you look at it and you're like, this is the fire in this game is fucking crazy. Holy shit. They did a really good job with it. They did a really, really good job. But yeah, flamethrowers, because when we think about flamethrowers in modern games, especially competitive games, you have this thing of like, well, fire is really fucked. But at the same time, we have to balance this game. And so it has to be really short range. It has to be really low ammo. It has to be really... And so it's really like single player implementations. Yeah. Vectroid says Return to Castle Wolfenstein. Yeah, that's... Yes. That was a really good one, if I remember right. Current Call of Duty... This year's Call of Duty has a category of attachments. Oh, was it Duncan that said that? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Has a category of attachments that they call aftermarket parts. And in a lot of cases, it's like, some of them are like 3D printed looking stocks that you're strapping onto a pistol to give it more stability or make it full auto or make it, it's like, what's some weird shit we can bolt to a gun? Like, I'm surprised that they're not like, here's a 3D printed switch, since everyone's talking about switches. Kendrick out here talking about switches. We've got to have switches in our game. They probably actually do have full auto kits for pistols in that game. Now that I think about it, but they have a couple of underbarrel attachments for guns in that game. They have a chainsaw, so you can kind of make a Gears of War gun in that game, which is ridiculous. But they also have an underbarrel flamethrower, and it's good because it's not. Like, competitively speaking, it's not great because the range on the flamethrower sort of sucks. It's like you might as well just use a shotgun at that point in terms of the range and spread and whatever else. But since no one uses the flamethrower in that game because it's not, part of the meta or whatever, at least I feel like I have not seen the flamethrower in Call of Duty since the week it first was added to the game. But it is such a fun, weird surprise thing of just like, oh, by the way, I set you on fire. It's a really silly flamethrower, I guess I would say, in this year's Call of Duty game. It's weird, you think about, and it's not always the case, but like the way weapons have to be balanced in competitive multiplayer games, I think really impacts our view on the viability of some of those weapons in the real world, which is... not, it's why, shotguns are always really hard to do in video games because shotguns are really fucked, man. In terms of like, close quarters combat. It's, it's a fucking shotgun. It's fucked up. Anyway, the range and all that, I don't know. That's enough. Well, maybe we'll have some more shotgun talk another day. I don't know. Kevin writes in and says, I've been messing with my emulation library setup this past weekend, and I decided to test run a few games to see how things are running. I randomly decided to boot up The Suffering on PlayStation 2 and found myself playing more of it than I expected to. It was cool seeing a game in a contemporary prison setting, a setting not often used outside of sections of games or in something like a sci-fi setting like Chronicles of Riddick or Callisto Protocol. The art direction and creature design was impressive for its time, which helps to sell the gritty setting without going so overboard that it's embarrassing to interact with, like a lot of early 2000s media can do. The developers also threw in a morality system which determined not only the ending of the game, but also the beginning of its sequel, The Ties That Bind, if you transferred your save over. It was basic, but there were some interesting decisions to make throughout the game that fit the setting and played with the idea of what was right or wrong, like being presented with the option to kill a fellow inmate, but it's considered good because it's an act of mercy after he was mortally wounded. Okay. My question to you is, how were your experiences with the suffering and the ties that bind? If you had one, what other games take place primarily within a prison setting that you remember playing? I can understand why developers might not want their games to take place in such a controversial setting, but there are a lot of interesting and fun mechanics that can take place, as well as a lot of creative stories that could be told. Yeah, prison games. I mean, there's Prison Architect if you want to have the kind of basic thing. The Suffering, yes, that game was set in a prison, but when I think about The Suffering, I think more of the horror aspects of that the prison stuff kind of comes secondary to it being not quite survival horror. It's not a big ammo management kind of thing, but it is sort of you are shooting a lot of monsters in that game. And so I think about that, but games that are primarily set in a prison, yeah, I mean, Arkham Asylum kinda comes to mind, but in terms of like contemporary prisons and having games set there, yeah, I mean, he mentions Callisto Protocol and Escape from Butcher Bay as being like kind of sci-fi takes on it, but like, yeah, I'm trying to think about other games that are, there was they made a game based on The Great Escape, right? That came out on Xbox, didn't it? That's technically... There's that old text adventure game based on The Prisoner called The Prisoner. But I'm having a hard time coming up with any other kind of like full-on games set in prisons. It's always like a level, like, oh, Sam Fisher had to go to jail or do this, or, oh, we got to infiltrate a prison and go undercover, and so this mission you're going to be not have your guns and all of that sort of stuff. The Suffering, I remember enjoying The Suffering. That's a Midway joint, PS2 era. If I remember correctly. And I did not remember like the morality system or like the idea that you could import your save into the sequel. I'm pretty sure I also reviewed the sequel, but I don't remember for sure. But The Suffering was all right. It was fine. It was an okay kind of shooter. And the prison stuff was all right. But yeah, it's not, it's like there are other inmates, but it's really way more about you shooting monsters and the prison being a dark place for you to shoot monsters in. Really, it's kind of way more focused on that. Mord from Estonia writes in and says, I don't know how much of a completionist you are when it comes to collectibles or achievements / trophies, but what are some of your favorite games from the PS4 and Xbox One era from that perspective, or just games you played to completion or near completion? I know this can be tough to do, especially as you cover a lot of games, but yeah, so, I think my completionist era really was the Xbox 360. And so by the time we got to PS4 and Xbox One, I had kind of lost interest in achievements. And so that was really the thing that, because I was not necessarily a completionist prior to that. I was not always the person who needed to get, complete 100% of a game. Like I did not complete 100% of GTA 3. I finished the story, but I did not need to go do every single side mission, every single this and every single that. Like I was never really that person unless they gave you good reasons to do so. That was something that like Saints Row the Third and 4 to a certain extent, like, games that like, as you complete side missions or as you complete large aspects of the game, it basically levels you up to a point where you're getting practically cheat codes. It's just like, oh, by completing this, I have infinite ammo on submachine guns or something like that. You're like, great, this is awesome. Um, and so now I feel much more led by like, what's the interesting stuff in this game? I'm going to try to do it. But also there is still like, I find myself, especially in the early goings of a game, doing as much of the side stuff as possible before advancing the main story. Which in some games means you're over leveled for later content and can break progression in some games a little bit. But that stuff, it was always the achievements. And even then, it wasn't something that I would go too far out of my way to, engage with deliberately difficult games to get those achievements. It was really more of a race to the bottom in terms of like, what would be a funny game for me to have all of the achievement points in? And is it easy to do so? And so you're like, oh, Avatar, this Avatar, The Last Airbender game, you can get all 5 of the achievements and get 1,000 achievement points in like 10 minutes. I love it. I'm here. Or whatever. There was a bear, like some bear cartoon game that came out on 360. There was a movie. I'm going to say A Bear's Life, but that's not the name of it. Barely Legal. No, that's not it. Open Season. Yes, that was the name of it. Like I got a GameFly account specifically to try to use it for achievements. And the copy of Open Season that I got from GameFly, I was playing that on a hot summer day when my Xbox red ringed. So Open Season killed my Xbox. But yeah, in terms of completionism, I think a lot of that stuff goes back to prior to the PS4 and Xbox One era. That's definitely a period of time where I was, covering a lot of games on a regular basis. And so, you really get into this rhythm of moving from game to game to game to game to game. And so you don't often have the time to really stick with something long enough to go and get all of those achievements. But that was something that, like I feel like in a lot of 16-bit games, I would want to do that. Like that was definitely like a Mario World. We've got to get every exit kind of thing. And, but yeah, the Xbox 360 really drove a lot of that. I was going to say compulsion, but it really, it was just a fun competition for a handful of years there with a handful of people who also cared about that too. And then, people went their separate ways and, and got other jobs. And then the PS4 came out and the Xbox One came out and everyone moved from, like I've talked before about the covering games was a lot about covering the lead platform because that was something that, all right, cool. Sorry. There was someone here spraying bug spray. The Xbox 360 was the dominant platform in the US, and so by and large publishers sent out Xbox 360 copies of games. If you wanted PS3, you could go back to them and say, like, hey, we really want to cover it on both platforms, we really want to do that, but the Xbox 360 had become the dominant platform. And then when the PS4 came out and the Xbox One came out, all that stuff flipped. The PS4 became the dominant platform, and so publishers were much more apt to send out PS4 codes. This goes back to even in the PS2 days, which we talked a little bit about last week when we were talking about the original Xbox being more technically powerful than the PlayStation 2. No one cared. When publishers sent us preview copies of games, they often would send the PS2 version because they knew the install base was larger. They know that they would reach more people if they said, here's the PS2 version of the game. Here's go pre-order the PS2 version of the game. All of their pre-order campaigns would be oftentimes built around their preview cycles, and pre-order campaigns and all that other stuff were often built around whatever the lead platform was at the time. And so they cared much more about goosing their numbers on the PS2 with preview coverage and so on and so forth than they did about GameCube or Xbox. And the way all of that trickled down was Xbox fans saying, oh, you guys are biased and blah, blah, blah. I was like, no, we're just covering the stuff that most people own because it's more effective coverage that way. We're also covering the other versions of the game. We're not leaving anything out in the cold because we had enough people to do that back then. But at the end of the day, when it comes to promoting a version of the game, and back then all of the games were separate on the site, and so you could link to the PS2 version or you could link to the GameCube version, you always linked to the PS2 version, unless you were specifically on the GameCube homepage, and then you would get what you were looking for that way. But yeah, in terms of like playing games to completion, it's something I've been pretty good at avoiding. Because I think it's so rarely worth doing. The rewards you get for like, I 100%ed this game, and now what? Congratulations, you got all the sea shanties or whatever. I don't know. I'm much more likely to jump through those kinds of hoops in games that have a multiplayer component where I can show it off to someone else. As opposed to, single player games and so on. Matt from Arizona writes in and says, I'm watching the recently released Hall of Fame episode about Street Fighter II IBM. If you want to know more about SF2 IBM, head over to the YouTube channel. And the most recent Hall of Fame video that is publicly available is about SF2 IBM, which is a weird fan game DOS port, not even a port, DOS ripoff version of Street Fighter 2 that then people got their hands on. It came out of China, I guess. And then other people got their hands on it and started inserting like Mortal Kombat characters into it and all this other stuff. It's like kind of a precursor to, the whole Mugen thing. And that got me thinking about the 90s fighting game remade for PC that I ended up playing a lot of, Pong Combat. What memories do you have of this seminal Tennis for Two meets Cage Fight Deathmatch machine? Yeah, Pong Combat, that's combat with a K. It was a DOS game, it was a fan game, it was just released online, and you could download Pong Combat, and there were a few patches of it for it, and you would select different characters, like you would have different colored paddles that would have different moves, and so like the yellow paddle had a scorpion spear type thing you could use to kind of lock the other paddle into place and hopefully get them to miss the ball. And so you were playing Pong in addition to having some of these special moves, and then they made fatalities and all this other kind of silly stuff. It was funny. It was like a funny game for the time, It's like, here's this bloody Pong paddle ripping another one in half and all this really silly shit. And it was like it felt like a big deal for a little bit. I know Glenn Rubenstein, who, we've done episodes of Game Boys to Men. We've talked about some of our time in the 90s. I don't know if this is a story that will come up, but I should ask him about it, what he remembers about it. But I remember there being a period of time where I want to say he got in touch with the author of Pong Combat and was like trying to like see if there was a way to commercialize, like could he be the guy that finds it a publisher, like be some kind of middleman somewhere in there to bring Pong Combat to the masses. Nothing ever came of that, it just sort of exists out there. You can still go find it and play it, I'm sure. But I think he was trying to bring it, like trying to find a way to bring it out more officially, which they definitely would have had to rename it. Like it's a lot of that's protected by parody, but they would still probably have to rename it. Max in New Hampshire writes in, I just played the first hour of Immortals of Avium and it stinks. I spent nearly the entire time following an NPC or watching cutscenes. What makes for a compelling intro and tutorial? Is there a game that comes to mind that makes a great first impression? I don't know, man. This all gets into, I think, games that kind of throw you into the middle of a situation and you're like, oh my God, like, Halo 2, I think, is a pretty decent intro. Halo 3, perhaps. I don't know. Games used to come with manuals and no one read them, but because they came with manuals, game developers felt comfortable leaving the tutorial for the game in the manual as opposed to in the game itself. And now, the game is the manual. So they have to have these moments where it's like, oh my God, there's a crawl space here, but I don't know how we're going to get into it. And then you walk up to it and it pops up a little thing and says, press the circle button to crouch. And you're like, oh, like every other video game. Oh, okay. Yeah. And I get it. I get why games are that way. Players often didn't read the manual and players would get confused. And so if you're tutorializing that stuff early on in the game, and then, even if players get stuck, having a pop-up that says, yo, you can crouch here, not always the worst idea for certain types of players, for certain people. I look at it as like kind of, it's sort of an accessibility thing. I don't mean that in the, I mean, it can make games more accessible to people who will play an hour of a game and then not play it for a month and a half and then come back to it and not know what the hell they're doing. I think that there's just a lot of tutorial layer stuff in games these days that it makes for a lot of really drab first hours, And Immortals of Avium, yes, the intro to that game is you running behind someone as they tell you about the world, as they talk to you about what you're doing, and we got to go steal some stuff. We love stealing shit. We're good criminals. We love to steal. Let's get back to our crime family because we just got done criming. And oh no, there's an explosion. Quick, run after me. When you do a running jump, you can jump like this. Also, here's how you shoot. And also crouch under this and do this, and Immortals of Avium, I think that whole game, well, I didn't play the whole game, but I certainly played past the first hour and got to a point with it where I'm like, I'm not doing any more of this. Boy, oh boy. It was just a very dull thing. Even once you got out of the tutorial, it was just this like, ugh, God. Like, these characters keep talking and I sure don't care, but also the action is not good enough for me to feel like, well, at least I'm having a great time in between these dumb things. Yeah, the Titanfall tutorial, like having like the little, repeatable little time trial thing. Call of Duty would do that. They don't do that anymore. I liked when Call of Duty had the little danger house little room and you'd run through and try to shoot targets and not shoot civilians, and then at the end it would recommend a difficulty. I always thought that was kind of a cool idea. I get why they don't do it, because like the people playing the campaign, the few people playing the campaign. One of my rarest achievements on Steam is a Modern Warfare 2 achievement from the campaign, the remade Modern Warfare 2, where it's like it was not a difficult one to get. It was one I got just kind of along the way. The Helldivers 2 tutorial, the nicest thing you could say about it is that it's fast. And that it kind of helps set the tone for the game by being really over the top with all of its, democracy, hooray stuff. It's not a political game. Fucking dipshits. Fucking idiots, man. Anyway, yeah, Helldivers 2, the opening to that thing works pretty well, just because it's, not what you're doing is not super engaging, but it walks you through the stuff you need to know really quick. None of it is like out of left field. It's like, no, just you shoot and you can change weapons. And here's how you call in stuff. Like here, how you call in stuff is the one thing they need to really make sure before you get out of that tutorial. You can dive, get out there, soldier. Here's your cape. But yeah, it's I think the best intros to video games, like the best you can hope for in a lot of these cases, is one that really sets the tone for you, one that really creates a vibe and establishes the universe and helps you figure out where you currently fit into it from a story perspective, while also being like, hey man, crouch under this. You should probably you should probably mantle over this. But it feels like a lot of the games that have those mechanics and tutorials, it's all the same, At some point, there should almost be different versions of a tutorial. And they don't do this because who cares? Like the people that don't need the tutorials are not complaining loud enough for this to be changed, but like there should almost be a system level tutorial these days. And I think that's maybe a damning thing to say about big games, big budget gaming these days. But you could just do a first person shooter tutorial once and be 80% of the way there for most of those games. Not every game needs to have the like, here's the thing you crouch under, here's the thing you mantle over, and here's a target range. Did you know that changing from your primary to your secondary is always faster than reloading your primary? Anyway, here's a hole for you to throw a grenade in. Like, maybe, like, what if a Helldivers 2, for example, and the Helldivers 2, it's not a bad tutorial, but just to use it as an example here because it's a recent release, what if you had a version of the Helldivers 2 tutorial that was solely focused on you calling in your stratagems? Because that's the mechanic, the kind of new mechanic, or the abnormal mechanic, I guess I should say. And it skips all of the other shooting, or skips most of the shooting stuff, because it looks at your profile and it knows you played this game, this game, this game, and this game. You're probably good. And what if by default it gives you the kind of abbreviated new functionality tutorial as opposed to the full one? I don't know. Like it. That feels like it would, there'd be some feel that you would not have in that tutorial, because you would want to get a feel for how the guns reload and how the guns shoot. And the tutorial does give you that. So, there is value there. So again, Helldivers is probably not the perfect example for this, but, adaptive tutorials, maybe that would help with some of this stuff. But again, like oftentimes the tutorial is used to establish tone, establish the setting for the story, give you a little bit of, some facts about the universe along the way before you get into it. So when they do that right, I don't mind it, but it can't, it has to be kind of quick. But it's hard. I think, because there are so many, and it's a good problem, right? Because at the end of the day, what that means is there are a lot of different people playing video games these days. There are people who need that level of tutorial and then some to figure out what they're doing and understand what to do. And then there are players on the other end of that are just like, oh my God, get me through this fucking thing. What the fuck? It'd be nice if there were better ways to serve those different player bases, but I don't think it's enough of a problem to require, in a world where, every resource in a game developer is going to be always stretched razor fucking thin, the idea of spending even more time on tutorials to try to make a lesser tutorial for players that don't need one, it's time you could probably better spend somewhere else, right? Let's see. We got a couple of questions about Zillion this week. I'll take this one because it's shorter. Anders from Stockholm writes in and asks, did Sega ever make a Metroid competitor? Because I've been playing Super Metroid for the first time recently since I was a Sega kid in the 16-bit days, but it got me thinking about how aside from maybe Zillion for the Master System, Sega never really seemed to make their own search action game, but made a few attempts at their version of Zelda. You've talked a bit about how Metroid wasn't a huge hit in Japan. Do you think this might be why, or is there an answer I'm just oblivious to? I'm sure that's probably part of it, right? If Metroid didn't exactly set the world on fire back then, there was not necessarily a huge call to duplicate that game. Zillion on the Master System kind of is that style of game. It's not purely, you're not always getting a ton of extra abilities in Zillion. It really is a maze you're going through. You're finding Apple, you're finding Champ, and you are getting the key cards and entering the code and escaping. So it's less about like, now I can double jump and now I can do this. You do get some abilities like that. So there is that. But yeah, Sega in that era didn't really seem to, I can't think of any other cases where 16-bit Sega made a game that you would compare to Metroid. I was going to say the Genesis version of eSWAT is less of a straightforward arcade game than the arcade version was, but that's not doing that at all. Yeah, I'm trying to think of any other Sega games from that era. Or even just Genesis games in general that were kind of doing that. And I'm having a hard time really thinking about even third-party Genesis games that were. Yeah, I can't really think of any good examples there. Yeah, Wonder Boy and Monster World. I guess that's kind of not sort of. But yeah, it was, I assume that's because, Metroid was not the most popular game in the world, and not to say it was unpopular per se, but it was not a thought leader, I suppose, in Japanese game development. But also, there are games. There are games prior to Metroid that you would look at. I'm trying to think about. Does Thexter count? Or is Thexter? It's been too long since I've played Thexter. That's a sentence. It's been too long since I've played Thexter. But Thexter was a little more straightforward, I thought. Yeah, maybe Thexter doesn't really count. Let's see here. Cal in Manchester writes in and says, do you ever worry that the concept of Game of the Year takes up too much space in the minds of players and journalists alike? Certain people in the games space seem like they are constantly talking about what might end up being Game of the Year. And when big games get released, I've seen taglines like, this will take some beating for Game of the Year. Have you ever been concerned that a constant focus on Game of the Year makes people less likely to stick with games that don't stick out as Game of the Year contenders, even if they are somewhat enjoying them? Does it create a reductive look at gaming in general? I know it's always been a thing, but in recent years, it's felt somewhat oversaturated to me. I have never done. I am the opposite of this, and I wish I was a little bit better about it, but I think I agree that if you're playing games and thinking in the back of your mind, is this a Game of the Year contender? Who fucking cares? Like that doesn't matter at all. But game of the year is, there is no official overall game of the year thing. There's no, different publications pick what they think are the best games. There are some organizations that get together, like, like when DICE happens, that's when game developers vote on what they think the games of the year are. And you have the GDC awards as well. And, what the BAFTAs just happened pretty recently, right? And then, yeah, you have the Game Awards, which is multiple kind of journalists / creator people coming together to judge for that, I guess. But there is no official, like, this is the game of the year. When companies want to have their game of the year edition of the game, sometimes you look at it and go like, who gave this game of the year? No one. But they called it game of the year edition anyway. That doesn't happen as much anymore, but it was fantastic. I think the Game Awards have pulled ahead in terms of the public perception of like what's the game of the year. I think that's become probably the most prominent example of a game of the year. But at the same time, I don't approach the games this way. I think, except I would say potentially in the shorthand of, no, dude, this game is really good. I think that's, like if you were ever going to say like, oh yeah, this seems like it could be a game of the year contender. That's probably all I would ever say about a game like that in that specific context. It would be more just like, yeah, man, it's really good. Like maybe it'll end up being the best game of this year. I think towards the end of the year, sort of that stuff happens a little more because maybe you're starting to think about the end of the year and go like, oh, is this a game we need to think about in this context? Yes or no? But like game of the year, I'm not going to say it's a joke. It was never a joke. It was always taken seriously. But part of the fun of doing game of the year was taking something kind of ridiculous and taking it too seriously. Like that's the goof. Having all these esoteric arguments about the minutia of two games that are completely dissimilar to try to say which one is better than the other. It was always more about that conversation than it was about like what won or whatever else, like generally speaking. I think especially these days, with kind of where journalism is at in a lot of ways, I think gaming publications trying to like put on airs about their game of the year and be like, this is our, I think is fucking crazy. I think saying like, hey, here's the discussions. It's part of why I felt good about broadcasting debates for game of the year, because it was like, this is actually the meat of this and it's fun. I always enjoyed doing it. Even in some years I felt like I was like, I don't really know that I have a dog in this fight when we get to the final award. Like, I don't know that I have strong feelings about number one. I have strong feelings about games that would need to be top 5, but like, rest of it, whatever. And then some years where I go like, no, this game is definitely better than all these other games. And I'm ready to like fight that fight or whatever. But no, for me, that was always just like a kind of a fun thing. But it's a frivolous thing that you take seriously. I think that to me is kind of the best way to approach it. And you don't want to do it too frivolously. You want to take it seriously because at the end of the day, it is something that publishers do sometimes care about. And so if you're overly haphazard with it, I think then you need to come up with a different name for it and so on and so forth. I think that just because the industry takes that a certain way when it comes to how they want to market their games going forward, and they're just like, yeah, no, this is you gave a game of the year, and you're like, yeah, I guess we did. All right, sure, yes. And so I think you have to kind of find a line there. But ultimately, I think what game of the year is meant to do is it is meant to kind of find a way to talk about the year in general, but it also is a way to point out like, hey, here are some great games that we enjoyed the most throughout the year, and I hope that the the teams behind these games were well compensated for this thing, because boy, it's great, or whatever it is, but the it was kind of always meant to be focused in that way. That was always the thing for like E3 awards and such too. It was like the idea of awards at a trade show, game of the show, is always sort of a weird thing. Because you're judging a presentation, you're judging a vertical slice, a very narrow aspect of a game, and saying, this is the best thing I saw over the last 3 days or 7 days or 2 weeks or, whatever. And I think that's all it is. But like, when you hear about it from the other side, from developers, like, and not every studio was this way when it came to E3 awards, but the thing I always heard, and the reason why I always felt okay about doing them, and the reason I always felt okay about taking them seriously, or seriously as you can, is because you would hear from dev teams. They'd be like, yeah, man, we've been in the trenches on this thing for 2.5 years. This is us finally putting our head above water and like going like, this is what we've been working on. Does anyone even care? We don't know anymore. We have lost all perspective. We're here in a dark room 18 hours a day, fucking making Master Chief's helmet look better. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing anymore. We've got another 1.5 years of this left on this thing. What am I doing with, and to then hear like, no, like we showed the thing you crunched on, the weird scripted demo you guys crunched on for 6 weeks that took time away from developing the real game. We presented that to a bunch of media and they were like, yo, this looks fucking hot. You end up in that situation where like developers end up feeling energized by it, like by the reaction. And it's not just the awards, but just by positive reaction to their game. In that environment, in what can be a relatively cutthroat environment of like, there are a lot of games there. And so, you stood above the rest. And so in those sorts of situations, like that was something that, like I look at that and go like, well, that's nice to be able to do. And it also means, hey, we have to take this seriously, because it would be very easy to just like, someone says like, oh, fill out your ballot for game of show, and you just go, who cares? These are fake. These games aren't even out yet. Who cares? But you have to at least like try to take it seriously enough and go like, no, like, while the nature of these awards is kind of ridiculous because we're judging like a marketing focused presentation, whether it's and the E3 awards were always judged on a game had to be playable. But that was really just like interactive. Like the BioShock Infinite demo was always one that you go back to as like, you say, I must be a judge, and then they show you in a back room and they go like, here, touch it. It's the demo that people were playing over and over again, and they're playing it live, and you can play it and go like, this is an interactive demo, but it's not a video game yet. And if you run too far that way or too far that way, there's nothing there. And if you keep running in that direction, it will eventually break, because it's a very limited in scope thing. But because you could touch it and see that it was interactive, it was eligible for awards. And so that rule of a game must be playable was always kind of sort of a weird one, but a meaningful one, because you don't want to just judge trailers all day long, because trailers can be extra fake. At least you're touching a thing that was like compiled and runs, and you go, okay, this is a thing that is at least trying to be some build of a video game somewhere, even if all of this work got thrown away a week later and they went to go finish the real game or whatever. It is less fake than a trailer, I suppose. And so that stuff was always a little weird too. But no, I that was always the thing that made me a believer in it. And it's not, like, who cares about me? What do I think about, whatever. But I think in the wider context of like these kind of, whether it's a site-wide award or whether it's, something like the Game Awards or something like the way the games critics was the GCA, the Game Critics Association, is that what they called the E3 judging thing? I always forget. It always made me want to make sure that I was taking it as seriously as I could in those contexts, because there were people who cared about winning and losing, and I felt an obligation at that point to be like, no, well, I have to take this seriously, because I want to make sure that, you know, the way I feel about games is represented in this wider context. Which every time I submit my nominations for the Game Awards, it often feels like there's always one or two games that I feel really strongly about being nominated on a list that don't make it, and I go like, fuck. And I start going like, who else even fucking judges for this thing? What the fuck were they doing that they didn't nominate? Did you play El Paso elsewhere? What the fuck were you... Anyway, so, you know, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, like, it's serious until it isn't, and it's not serious until it is. You know, like in context, it is taken seriously by people for the right reasons, and not just as a marketing thing, and not just as a, you know, a bullshit little tag to put on your box, or you know, on your Steam page, or whatever it is. And so, and that's why I've always felt good about being a part of it. Like I've been a part of the Game Awards judging. I want to say since Keeley started doing, like, I was a judge for the last year of the Spike TV Game Awards. I did judging for Spike TV in 2007. And then I ended up going to the show in Vegas because I was suddenly out of a job. And yeah. But yeah, I feel okay about that process. I know, like, people always have a lot to say about the award show itself, and I think that there's certainly valid criticism to be had of the way some of that stuff is presented. But for my little corner of it, where I write an email saying, here are the games I think is good, I try to take that as seriously as I can. You know, because if I wasn't going to do that, then don't sign up for it, I guess. We're just about out of time here. But Glenn writes in. I don't know where Glenn is from. He did not say. Just says, what happened to clips? They were amazing and Pharrell's beats slapped. It's also fucking weird to see people like T.I. have kids and switch it up, but that's just how it goes, right? 2000s were the best time for the South. Yeah, I don't know. So clips, I mean, you know, Pusha T is still putting out his solo material. I think his last record was disappointing compared to a lot of his previous work. But Push, he's put out some fucking incredible solo stuff. Malice found the Lord and changed his name to No Malice. And so at that point, he felt like maybe he shouldn't keep rapping about cocaine. No Malice has showed up. I believe he's on a track on Pusha T's most recent release, because they're brothers. So, you know, they still get back together and do some stuff. And Pusha T raps about selling cocaine, and No Malice doesn't. Is kind of how that goes. I think there's always a possibility that they would put out an album together again at some point, but I don't know. You know, I don't know how well that would work. But yeah, yep. When Clips was together, Hell Hath No Fury, and all the We Got It for Cheap mixtapes and everything, like, that stuff is still astounding material. Hell Hath No Clips. Very good. And I thought I think a lot of Pusha T solo stuff is fantastic as well. But again, I think that some of it is a little uneven, especially the most recent, the It's Almost Dry, I think is I have not I have not been a huge fan of that record. It's interesting times in hip hop. We might have a hot summer. Seems like we might have a very hot summer. Seems like the summer is heating up here in the springtime. Rick Ross is in the news. Pusha T must be having a great time right now watching everyone else run, like just like everything Push wanted to say about Drake. Everyone else is just out there saying it 10 times as much. And I'm sure I want to believe on some level he's just like this, just going like, all right, I still got all those tracks that you know, they talked me out of releasing. The Jay Prince said I couldn't put out because it was too much. It was going to cause too much violence. I like to think that Pusha T will have a role in this, but basically, I guess the short version of it is like the entire modern rap industry has decided that they're fucking done with Drake. Like, fuck Drake's goofy ass, dumbass. Like, what a fucking stupid ass. And so everyone is basically like you know, the Kendrick Lamar was kind of the first through the door of this most recent wave. And then he kind of had some shots at J. Cole in that. And then J. Cole responded with a diss track of his own and then retracted it. And said like, no, yeah, on my diss record, I said that Kendrick was not a good rapper and his albums were not good. And I don't feel that way. It's like the most J. Cole thing J. Cole could have fucking done is to just be like, yeah, I guess maybe, you know, I'm among the best rapper. But there was this Future and Metro Boomin project that came out a few weeks ago, and then a follow-up to that just came out like late last week. It was like a 2-disc set of more shit. And it's like, what is like The Weeknd is on there fucking talking his shit. A$AP Rocky is out there with some things to say about Drake as well. And then Rick Ross, who just, you know, I don't know. I've not been following this stuff super closely. So like, I don't know exactly how Rick Ross got pulled into this, but you know, all these people have pasts with Drake in some ways, shape or form, or they've been on tracks together or whatever else. Rick Ross released his track. What is it? It's called, it's on Spotify now. I was just listening to it this morning there. It's not, you know, a lot of the, you know, it's called Champagne Moments. And he's got an Instagram story that is worth looking at as well. That's very funny when he's talking about the Chevys, when Rick Ross is talking about the Chevys. It's very funny. And Rick Ross is, yes, he's accusing Drake of getting surgery to make it look like he has a six-pack that he has six-pack abs, but he got surgery to get that done. And yeah, it's yes. I think Rick Ross is in a position, a very interesting position, because what the fuck can Rick Ross say in any kind of diss track fashion that it doesn't immediately get responded to with someone saying, you're a cop. You're literally a fucking corrections officer. Like, what the, like, why did anyone let you rap in the first place, Rick Ross? So I expect that gets thrown in a lot of this stuff. So you need to know DJ Khaled's take. I thought DJ Khaled was producing the Drake response or some, I thought that there was some affiliation there, that DJ Khaled has chosen Drake's side in all of this, which is perfect because fuck DJ Khaled. I don't know. This stuff is dumb. I think a lot of rap beef is very fucking corny, but also Drake is fucking terrible. I thought that, you know, Drake had his moments there when Nothing Was the Same came out. I was like, this is a great record that I identify with in some weird way. And then when he had the stuff with Meek Mill, those tracks were good. And I was like, oh, Drake, huh? And then everything after that has been garbage. Every single thing. So, except for the stream where he started talking about a Nita Max win. That's the only good thing Drake has done in the last decade. Streaming with Ninja is the most relevant thing Drake has done in the last decade. How about that? No, I don't know, whatever. He sells records, but like, that's, who cares? That's not the point here. So I don't know, like rap beef stuff, like that's, I don't know. I've not been keeping up super closely with it, but because I use TikTok, it has been forced in front of me over and over and over again, nonstop for the past several weeks, because that's just how my algorithm is leaning these days. So, yeah, I've kind of been seeing a lot of it lately. And it's been interesting. I don't know. It's, I wonder what ends up happening. Yeah, I don't know. Like, who else has something to say? Does this escalate in some nasty ways? Maybe. Yeah, all we need is like Kanye to throw in with Drake and just be like, I like Drake as well. Like, yes, get them all over on the same side. We can deal with them all at once. Yeah, we'll see if it ends up being a surgical summer. We were promised our surgical summer years ago from Pusha T, and it didn't happen. So I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, I'm gonna get going. That's the show. The thing I'll say is the Rick Ross track is pretty good for what it is. But I think his Instagram story where he is talking shit about Drake is way funnier than the track is itself. And then Drake responded with a picture of a text message from his mom, which, that's pretty hard. That's hard, right? We can all agree. Wow, that's tough, man. Yeah. It's just goofy. Drake is fucking goofy. Anyway, that's going to do it for the show. I'll be back tomorrow to stream some more stuff for Wednesday. And then Friday, we'll rank some more games. And then sign up for the Patreon. I am hopefully probably not. Well, tonight's Tuesday. I've got a list of bullet points of things I need to cover to make a first step emulation video for people on Patreon. Go ahead, patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. Sign up. You get an ad-free version of this show, as well as additional content. And so this first video is going to, I think, lay the foundation for what's to come, because a lot of the things you'll learn when it comes to maintaining and setting up MAME is stuff that I think will apply to maintaining other emulators and games and all this other stuff. So that's going to be Patreon exclusive video series over there. Should be recording the first one of those this week. And that should be fun. I'm looking forward to doing that, because I get a lot of questions about that all the time, and I feel reasonably well suited to answer most of those questions. So yes, check that out. That'll all be on the Patreon, patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. And be back tomorrow. See you then. Bye.